Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Nicole Laube. Nicole Laube, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. She was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Laube, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by canine dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Laube, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Nicole Laube shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." The police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Laube's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Laube's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her, as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Laube's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said, "His behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved." A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down. So she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. "As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't." When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Laube's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex, like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jamie said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Nicole Laube said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jamie's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Laube's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Nicole Laube, Nicole's husband, said Jamie's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Laube's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Laube's case. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson, born on September 26, 1996 in Folkestone, United Kingdom, Jaden is the youngest of 3 children. Her parents had a strained relationship. Family problems led to her parents' divorce when Jaden was only 7 years old. Jaden lives with her father. Although Jaden lives with her father, the relationship with her mother Samantha Shuri remains strong. Jaden and her mother talk on the phone every night. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her life became increasingly unstable. Her father often ignored her, she began smoking and drinking, and spent time living with both parents. At the age of 13, Jayden ran away from her father's house and moved in with her mother, eventually winning a court order allowing her to stay there. Jayden was in a relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at the age of 14. Blakely had a profound influence on her, gradually changing her over time. Jayden was 15 when she started dating Ben, 20. The significant age gap worried Jayden's mother, but she couldn't stop her daughter from falling in love. Initially, their relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually deteriorated over time. And their relationship became increasingly strained. Ben controlled every aspect of Jayden's life. She stopped wearing makeup and became increasingly withdrawn. He dictated what clothes she wore and isolated her from family and friends. As a result, Jayden moved out of her mother's house and into a shelter for women who were victims of domestic violence. Although the shelter's rules forbade Ben from visiting, he continued to exert complete control over Jayden's life. Jayden and Ben frequently had arguments, and at one point, Jayden even warned the hostel staff about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Ben exerted significant control over Jayden, dictating her every move and restricting her freedom. He took away her mobile phone, convincing her that she didn't need anything else as long as she had him. Ben also prohibited her from interacting with men and monitored her social media activity. As a result, Jayden stopped attending school. Jayden's communication with her mother, which was once a daily occurrence, dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Her mother, Samantha, urged Jayden to return home and end the relationship with Ben, but Jayden refused. Ben's control over Jayden was both psychological and physical, and where Jayden was seen with visible bruises on her face. On November 30, 2013, Jayden announced to her mother that she was pregnant. Hoping to change Ben, she believed that the baby would bring positive changes to their relationship and his lifestyle. Jayden envisioned the baby would bring them closer together, and that Ben would return to the caring person she first met. Unfortunately, Ben has not changed. Once Ben gained complete control over Jayden, his true nature emerged. He isolated her from friends and family, leaving her financially dependent on him. The situation escalated to the point where Jayden was confined to her room, even restricted from using the bathroom without permission. Unbeknownst to Jayden, Ben was secretly dating other women, exerting the same manipulative control over them. Samantha learned about her daughter Jayden's pregnancy and asked her to come home, but Jayden declined, not wanting to cause her mother more trouble. When Jayden told her Ben about the pregnancy, he became enraged and denied being the father. He even threatened to post intimate photos and videos of Jayden on social media. Fearing Ben would follow through on his threat, Jayden reported him to the police a few days before she went missing. Ben had around 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jayden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jayden failed to return to her hostel for the night. Knowing about the problems in Jayden's life, the police tried to find her, but were unsuccessful. They contacted Jayden's mother Samantha by phone, but she did not know where Jayden was. On December 4, 2013, police received a report that Jayden was missing. Police contacted Jayden's boyfriend, Ben, to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, Ben was uncooperative and hung up several times, claiming that he did not know where Jayden was, Jayden having run away from home several times before, so her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate concerns. The next day, Ben was arrested and taken to the police station, but not in connection with Jayden's disappearance. The arrest was due to a report that Jayden had filed a few days earlier, stating that she feared Ben would post private photos of her online. The police questioned Ben. Ben denied any intention to post the photos and was released on bail the same day. Samantha distributed flyers with Jayden's picture. In addition to distributing flyers, she also used social media platforms to publicize Jayden's disappearance, hoping to get clues for the case. The police analyzed security footage. They collected surveillance camera footage from the motel where Jayden lived. The footage showed the girl going out to meet Ben but, then, did not return to her residence. On December 3rd, Jayden was seen again at Oxford railway station. Surveillance footage captured her walking inside with Ben, and nothing unusual occurred in the video. After tracking their movements, police discovered that Ben and Jayden had taken the train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. Jayden's last known location was the railway station in Didcot, where the footage showed her and Ben leaving the building. In the past, whenever Jayden ran away, she would usually contact her family within a day or two to let them know she was safe. This time, however, was different. Jayden had not contacted her family or friends, and there was no activity on her social media accounts. After reviewing surveillance camera footage showing Jayden boarding the train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. Police were certain that Ben knew where Jayden was and what had happened to her. The footage revealed that Ben returned to the train station alone, and there was no further sighting of Jayden. 1 week later, on December 10, 2013, Ben Blakely was arrested by the police. Police wanted to question Ben to find out what happened to Jayden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At that point, the police had not ruled out the possibility that Jayden might be hiding of her own free will or that Ben might be holding her. During the interrogation, Ben displayed confidence. He claimed to have no knowledge of Jayden's whereabouts. According to Ben, he and Jayden had broken up, and she was now in a relationship with someone else. Ben suggested that the police should focus on speaking with Jayden's new boyfriend, as he believed this person might have more information about her disappearance. Ben appeared indifferent to Jayden's situation, saying that the fact that they had broken up and Ben had a new girlfriend made her situation irrelevant to him. He suggested that the police check Jayden's social media accounts to gather information about her recent activities and interactions. Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder, despite Jayden still being missing. The police interviewed Jayden's friends to see if she might have gone to a safe location, but they found out that Jayden had distanced herself from her friends after she started dating Ben. As a result, no one knew if she had a place to hide. During the search for Jayden, a taxi driver from Didcot provided vital information to the police. On December 4th, at around 1 a.m., the taxi driver picked up a passenger on a dirt road. The passenger, a young man with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud, needed help lifting the suitcase into the taxi. The taxi driver became suspicious and wondered if he had accidentally witnessed a crime. The investigation revealed that the person who called the taxi was Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When questioned further, Ben refused to answer any further questions. Analysis of his phone location records showed that Ben had visited a number of locations in Didcot, including a disused rural shed where a taxi had picked him up that night. A team of police officers and sniffer dogs searched the shed as part of the investigation. It was also discovered that Ben and Jayden had visited the shed earlier. Police found a bracelet matching Jayden's near the scene. Trained sniffer dogs indicated the presence of a body inside the shed, but Jayden's body was not found. This led police to suspect a large suitcase was involved when Ben got into the taxi. Police have appealed to the public for assistance, asking anyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in rural Didcot to come forward. Meanwhile, officers have conducted interviews at nearby homes to gather more information. Footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jayden were not carrying suitcases, which led police to wonder where Ben got the suitcases. It is also possible that the man described by the taxi driver was not Ben. On December 14th, police discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned warehouse. When police visited Ben's grandmother, she later explained that Ben had taken a suitcase from her a few days earlier. He had arrived in a hurry, dumped the contents of the suitcase on the floor and left without explanation. Ben's grandmother said he returned home 2 days after Jayden went missing and threw his mountain bike into the shed. However, the bike was dirty when he returned. She also reported that 2 shovels were missing, only to reappear later, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the 2 shovels raised questions about Ben's intentions and the potential involvement of an accomplice. Notably, Ben and his younger brother Jake Blakely, 17, were also acquaintances of Jayden. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding mountain bikes together. As the investigation began, police found sufficient cause to suspect Jake of being involved in the crime and subsequently arrested him. The suitcase that Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn was sent to a laboratory for analysis to determine if it contained Jayden's DNA. Based on the available evidence, police developed a theory that Jayden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in the suitcase and moved to another location for burial. However, searching for Jayden's body in the vast field surrounding Didcot seemed challenging. To help narrow down the search area, the police used aviation to aid in the investigation and estimate the likely location of Jayden's burial site. Through aerial photography, police identified 10 locations with significant recent changes in soil surface. The police initially examined several sites but found no leads on Jayden's body. Before they could inspect all 10 locations, a new lead emerged when Jake Blakely began cooperating with police. He directed them to check his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near All Saints Church. This cemetery was one of the original 10 locations, although it was considered a low priority due to the common occurrence of soil changes in cemeteries. Police secured the cemetery after receiving information from Jake Blakely, who suggested that Jayden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave. This method of concealment had never been seen by police before. Jake and Ben's uncle reportedly died in 2006. The new developments in the case have attracted widespread media attention, as this is the first case in the country where a victim's body was concealed in an existing grave. A tent was set up in the cemetery to facilitate a forensic examination. Following this setup, Jayden's family received devastating news. Her body had been found in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. The body was found without clothes, and no jewelry was present. Forensic experts discovered evidence that Jayden had been severely beaten before her death. Specifically, her neck showed signs of strangulation, which was confirmed as the cause of death by the pathologist, with asphyxia being the official cause. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely changed his defense strategy, and he and his attorney drafted a confession letter stating that Ben was indeed responsible for Jayden's death. However, he maintained that the act was not intentional. According to his testimony, a heated argument led him to push Jayden, causing her to fall from a bridge near an abandoned warehouse. Ben tried to revive Jayden but was unsuccessful. He initially buried her in another location. He then moved the body to the cemetery, where it was buried in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy results contradicted his story. There was no evidence that she had fallen, but instead, her face showed signs of blunt force trauma. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, suggesting that Ben's story was not true. Ben Blakely was trying to reduce his guilt in Jayden's death. Jayden's father passed away due to heart problems before the trial started. On June 23, 2014, Ben Blakely was in court, and it became clear that he showed no regret for his actions. His behavior was provocative and aggressive, revealing his indifference to taking the life of Jayden and her unborn child. During the 4-week trial, it was revealed that Ben Blakely from Reading, Berks, had a history of being a violent and controlling partner. 3 of his previous girlfriends testified against him, sharing their experiences of being in abusive relationships with him. They reported that he would confiscate their phones, physical assault them, and even grab them by the throat if they responded back or if he suspected them of cheating. Throughout the trial, Ben received multiple warnings from the judge for using profanity in the dock and on the witness stand, where he repeatedly shouted at the prosecutor, Richard Leem. His outbursts were so intense that Jaden's mother and other family members were forced to leave the courtroom in tears on multiple occasions. The judge, Patrick Eccles, was also pushed to his limits. He ordered Ben Blakely to be taken to the cells to continue the trial without him. Jake Blakely, who was under 18 at the time, said he had no idea what was inside the suitcase and thought he was burying weapons or dead animals. He was persuaded by his brother, Ben, who promised him an Xbox console and $100 in exchange for carrying out the mission. The prosecutor alleged that the crime was premeditated, suggesting that Ben Blakely intentionally took Jaden to a secluded location where he could commit the crime without being seen. It is believed that Blakely's actions were driven by a desire to control Jaden's life, which was disrupted by her pregnancy and her desire to start anew. Ben Blakely, who did not want to become a father. Jaden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, has spoken out in support of creating a domestic violence registry. In an interview with Sky News, she expressed her desire to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. She recalled the traumatic experience of identifying her daughter's body and stated that the memory would haunt her forever. In the year leading up to Jaden's death, Samantha believed that Jaden was the target of Ben's abuse. Samantha remembers an incident where Ben came to Samantha's apartment building the day after he verbally and physically abused Jaden. He managed to enter the building and banged on the door, demanding to see Jaden. Samantha refused to let him in, and in response, he spat on Samantha before leaving. That same day, Jaden went outside to smoke, and unfortunately, Ben found her. Samantha did not see or hear from Jaden for the next 2 weeks. During that time, Samantha assumed that Jaden had gone to Ben's house. As a result, it became difficult to contact Jaden because Ben had destroyed her phone or SIM card. Despite his horrific behavior, which included burning, beating, and starving Jaden, Ben remained in denial about his true nature. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before returning their verdict. Ben Blakely was found guilty of willfully murdering Jaden Parkinson. The judge told Ben Blakely that he took 17-year-old Jaden Parkinson to a remote area near Upton, where he strangled her to death. The judge also noted that Ben's behavior towards Jaden was marked by irrational jealousy, physical abuse, and emotional manipulation throughout their relationship. The judge found that Ben Blakely had taken control of Jaden's daily life. To isolate her, he took away her phone and restricted her movements while she was in the boarding house, even to the point of not allowing her to use the toilet, forcing her to urinate in plastic bottles. Despite Ben's abusive behavior, Jaden fought to leave him. Jaden finally found the courage to end their relationship last November. Ben threatened to share intimate photos of the two of them publicly. The court sentenced Ben Blakely, who was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Ben's younger brother, Jake Blakely, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Callie Ann Poulton. Callie Ann Poulton was born on September 20, 1989, in Rochester, New York. She was the only child in her family, and Callie's parents gave her all their attention and love. When Callie was 3 years old, her parents decided to divorce and Callie lived with her mother. Her father maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and visited Callie often. Callie's mother, Judy, moved to an apartment complex in the quiet area suburb of Rochester. Although Judy's ex-husband helped take care of Callie, she still had financial difficulties. When Callie was 4 years old, Judy found a part-time job to save money for a trip to Disney World with Callie the following summer. Judy's job was to deliver magazines to customers in her neighborhood. On the evening of May 23, 1994, Judy was getting ready for her job. Judy was sitting at home, putting flyers in the magazine before going out to socialize. At that time, Callie asked permission to go for a walk because she wanted to ride her tricycle on a beautiful evening. Judy looked outside and saw many other children playing in the yard, so Judy agreed to let her daughter go outside for a few minutes. However, when Judy finished getting ready and went outside to call Callie home, she could not find Callie there. Judy looked around but could not find Callie. She searched the yard and her body but could not find her daughter. She also could not hear Callie's tricycle, although it often made a clear noise. As time passed, Judy's worry increased and she began asking neighbors if they had seen Callie. Some reported seeing Callie playing with her friends in the yard, but did not know where she went after that. When the neighbors learned that Callie was missing, they joined in the search but were unable to find Callie or her bicycle. Judy believed that her daughter could not have gone anywhere on her own because she had taught Callie to only ride her bike in their yard. Callie had never told her mother and Callie's little bike could not take her far. Judy also thought that if Callie went out of the yard, she would be discovered immediately. Fearing the worst, Judy decided to contact the police for assistance. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene and began an urgent search. Firefighters and canine units soon joined the search. The police conducted a house-to-house search and searched the surrounding area. They believed that Callie was still somewhere in the area. Since the kidnapping was a possibility, the police suspected that the kidnappers might be residents of the complex. The reason is that the area has quite strict security controls, so it is unlikely that a stranger would enter the area and snatch Callie out of the yard without anyone noticing. The complex has a total of 300 apartments, and the residents are willing to cooperate with the police, opening their doors for them to search. In case no one is home, the complex manager will provide a spare key for the lock so that the police can check. However, all these efforts do not bring the desired results. No apartment has ever found Callie or her bicycle. The search continued throughout the night and around 4 a.m., the mission was reclassified as a kidnapping. A special police unit took over the project, and the undercovers asked Judy if there was anyone in their lives who might want to harm them. When the police asked about someone who might be involved in Callie's disappearance, Judy quickly met a man in the apartment complex that made her suspicious. The man, Mark, 22 years old, had just moved in with his wife and 1.5-year-old son. During the conversation with Mark, Judy felt that his actions were very strange. During a conversation, Mark said that Judy's daughter was very beautiful, but his tone of voice made Judy feel uncomfortable. What was more worrying was when Mark said that he had seen all the girls in the apartment complex and thought Callie was the prettiest. Mark once asked Judy a very surprising question. He wanted to know if Callie would talk to Judy if someone tried to touch Callie. Judy answered yes and immediately left the yard. Before that, Callie liked to play with Mark on the playground, but since that conversation, Judy has not let her daughter near him, even when she is present. During the conversation with the secrets, Judy recalled another detail. After she went out to look for Callie, she saw Mark walking out to the playground with his son. She asked him if he had seen Callie, and Mark said no. Judy also noticed something strange, that Mark's sneakers were missing their shoelaces, but she did not pay much attention to it at the time. The police decided to mark the matter and took him to the headquarters to determine some issues. Mark denied any involvement in Callie's disappearance and agreed to take a lie detector test. The test results showed that Mark answered truthfully, so he was released. In addition, Judy accidentally provided an alibi for Mark when she saw him playing with her son on the playground at the exact time she was looking for Callie. The police went to Mark's apartment early in the investigation but did not find Callie or Callie's bike. After eliminating Mark as a suspect, the undercover police continued their investigation. They began to investigate Judy to see if she was involved in Callie's disappearance. Judy understood that this was part of the investigation process and answered all of their questions honestly. Callie's disappearance attracted public attention when information about the incident was broadcast on local newspapers and posted on billboards all over the city. The alert received many calls with information, but after a thorough investigation, all of them turned up nothing. However, Judy did not give up and continued to search for Callie. Judy devoted all her time and energy to finding Callie. She contacted the media and did everything she could to find Callie. Some compassionate people have also come forward to help her, not only helping to distribute flyers but also raising a $100,000 reward for any useful information about Callie's disappearance. Judy was invited to appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Callie's disappearance was featured on a popular television show about unsolved cases. The police investigated the case for 2 years without success. Although they gathered some clues, nothing helped them find a solution. On August 9, 1996, when a woman called the police and told them about a serious argument between her and her husband. During the call, the woman said she was tired of her husband's strange behavior and wanted a divorce. The man tried to convince her not to do so, and told her about the difficulties he was facing. Suddenly, the man confessed a terrible secret: he had killed Callie. The woman was shocked and took her child to her father's house immediately. She then called 911 and revealed her husband's name as Mark Christie, who was also Judy's neighbor. The detectives were surprised to hear her story, but they soon encountered a serious problem. Under state law, any information shared between spouses is protected and cannot be used as evidence in court. This means that even if Mark tells the truth, the police cannot arrest or question him. Furthermore, the police recalled that Mark's apartment was searched in the early hours of the investigation, and he was in the yard with his child shortly after Callie went missing. This led the police to suspect that Mark did not have enough time to kidnap and kill Callie. After listening to Mark's wife's story, Detective Crow decided to find out more information. Through the investigation, Crow discovered that Mark and his family had moved out of the apartment complex just weeks after Callie went missing. Because the parents of the 2 girls accused Mark of standing naked in front of their house in full view. However, no formal investigation was conducted into this, because by law, Mark was standing in his own home. However, Mark's actions have raised considerable suspicion in the detective's mind. When Detective Crow visits Mark in another city 50 miles from Rochester, he is stopped by Mark's mother. She refuses to allow the detective to see Mark and demands the presence of a lawyer. Mark's mother states that her son will not answer any questions without his lawyer present. Mark seems to know about his wife's report to the police, and Detective Crow realizes that there is little he can do in this situation. Mark's confession to his wife cannot be used as evidence in court. However, Detective Crow is not giving up yet. While talking to Mark's mother, he convinces Mark to agree to answer some questions about Callie's case. Crow suggests that they go to a nearby restaurant and chat over coffee. Mark agrees, but only if Crow takes him to see his lawyer afterward. They stop at a nearby Italian restaurant. During this time, Detective Crow chatted with Mark in a friendly manner, trying not to pressure him. The tactic worked, and Mark began to speak. He expressed remorse for what he had done to Callie, saying that his actions had haunted him for the past 2 years. According to Crow, Mark kept seeing Callie's picture in newspapers and flyers, and her face seemed to follow him everywhere. To avoid scaring Mark, Crow approached the conversation cautiously. Although he had known Mark since the early days of the investigation, this was not their first conversation. Crow told Mark that he had fooled the entire police team. Mark responded that he did not want to boast, but the way he had disposed of the bike was very clever. Mark asked Crow if he wanted to know the details, but he warned that he would only talk about the bike and not reveal any more information. Crow tried to keep his tone light and friendly to avoid scaring Mark and gather as much information as possible. Mark wanted Crow to know that Callie's tricycle had been stored in his apartment for 3 days since Callie had gone missing. Mark knew that the police would search all apartments without a warrant because it was protocol when a child was in danger. Mark quickly decided to disassemble the bike into small parts and hide them in hard-to-find places in the apartment. Mark carefully hid some of the parts in his clothes and put them in the closet, while the other parts were put in small bags and hidden in his car. Mark then slowly disposed of these bags, storing them in places far from the apartment. During this time, the police were stationed at the exit of the apartment complex, checking each bike. Since they were only looking for Callie, these small bags did not attract their attention. Detective Crow sees an opportunity to get a full confession from Mark. So he begins to tell Mark that Callie's death may not have been his fault, but a tragic accident. Mark asks what sentence he could face, and Crow suggests that it could be around 25 years. Mark argues that it would be unfair for him to spend half his life behind bars, away from his wife and son. He also says that he has been living with his own personal grief for the past 2 years, and that should be taken into account when making a decision. Although these words may seem like an excuse, Crow continues his tactics. He advises Mark to ease his grief and tell what really happened. Mark says that he is willing to confess everything, but only after talking to a lawyer. Crow understands that the lawyer will not allow Mark to confess to the crime without evidence against him. So Crow told Mark that if he did not tell the truth, Callie's parents would never know what happened to Callie, or whether Callie suffered before she died. Mark replied, "Callie did not suffer." Crow felt that Mark was ready to confess, so he advised Mark to do the right thing for himself, his family, and God. Upon hearing this, Mark looked at Crow and finally admitted his crime. He reiterated that Callie did not suffer and confessed that he had strangled Callie. Mark added to his story that he had not done anything bad to Callie. However, Mark said that that evening, Callie came to his apartment and wanted to play with her 1.5-year-old son. Since he knew that Callie's mother would not agree to her coming to his house, Mark decided to keep quiet about it. When Callie entered the apartment, Callie went upstairs and went into the room to play with Mark's child. After about 10 minutes, Mark heard Callie's mother calling her name in the yard and became worried. Mark feared that Callie's mother would be angry that he had allowed her into the house without permission. Mark decided to go up to the and strangle Callie with his bare hands. Detective Crow questioned the accuracy of this story. It seemed that Mark had intended to lure Callie into his apartment by taking advantage of his wife's absence, and the excuse of playing with his son may have been just an excuse. There, Mark may have approached Callie, and when he heard Judy calling Callie's name, he feared that Callie would reveal what had just happened. In addition, Crow also recalled the detail that Judy had seen him wearing sneakers without laces, which he could have used as a deadly instrument. This means that the crime was not spontaneous, but planned by Mark. Mark tried to minimize the severity of his crime by changing some details in the story. But Detective Crow understood that if he spoke out his suspicions, Mark might change his mind and refuse to talk about what he did to Callie. So Detective Crow continued to act and listen to the story. Mark claimed that after the murder, he carried Callie's body into the kitchen and left her on the floor. He then took his son outside to create an alibi for himself, in order to divert the police's suspicions. Mark knew that Judy was calling his daughter's name in the yard. In order not to arouse suspicion, Mark wanted Judy to see him. Mark then returned home and placed the laundry basket on top of Callie's body, covering it with clothes. After a few minutes, he put the basket in the trunk of his car and took his son to work. At that time, many people were searching for Callie and no one paid attention to Mark. When he arrived at the company, Mark parked his car and left the laundry basket at the back door of the building. Then he drove forward, then Mark turned back and lied to his co-workers that he had forgotten something at work to cover up his actions. Then Mark climbed onto a tank of liquid coolant and dropped Callie in, before tying a heavy metal object to Callie. Then Mark threw away Callie's clothes, but did not remove Callie earrings. Finally, Mark returned home and joined the search for Callie with other neighbors. Mark took Callie's body out of his workplace before the police arrived to investigate. When confessing his crime, Mark said that killing Callie was a big mistake. After providing the necessary information to Detective Crow, Mark paid for the meal and left a $2 tip. He then accompanied the detective to the police station and was arrested for murder. Mark's attorney attempted to withdraw his confession, but was unsuccessful. Since Mark had volunteered the information, Detective Crow had not broken any laws. Mark's confession was still admissible. The police went to Mark's workplace and opened the box containing Callie's body. 2 years after Mark killed Callie, Callie's body was still in the box. Due to the high level of decomposition, experts were unable to determine the cause of death or any other details. They were only able to confirm the victim's identity, and Callie's family was finally able to bury Callie. Mark pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. Mark's lawyer had previously negotiated a deal that would see the kidnapping charges dropped and Mark would face only the murder charge. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in Milton, a small town in Florida, USA. She grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with her older sister. As children, they often played outside, skateboarded, and went bowling. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, about 25 miles away from her hometown, to explore the medical field and become a medical transcriptionist. To become a medical transcriptionist, Tanya did not need a medical degree but only had to take special courses. She moved in with her cousin, Vanita, to save on rent. In Pensacola, Tanya met a boy named Tim, and they began dating. They later moved in together, and in 1983, their son Timothy was born. However, Tanya's relationship with Tim was not perfect. They argued frequently, and about a year after Timothy was born, they decided to separate. At the end of 1984, Tanya temporarily moved in with her cousin, Vanita, who was now married and had 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place and move out as soon as she could. One day, Tanya, her sister, and Vanita's husband decided to go to a local bar to celebrate New Year's Eve. Vanita and Tanya dropped their children off at daycare and decided to enjoy the night. At the bar, they had a night full of laughter and music. As the clock struck midnight, they welcomed the new year, 1985. Vanita and her husband were about to go home, but the daycare they had left their children at closed at 1 a.m., so they needed to pick them up in an hour. However, Tanya wanted to stay at the bar a little longer because, for the past 2 years, she had been focused on work and taking care of her children. Tanya asked Vanita if she could pick up her son from daycare, and Vanita agreed since they lived together and needed to pick up her son anyway. Before Vanita and her husband left the bar, Vanita asked Tanya how she would get home since they had gone to the bar together by car. Tanya told Vanita not to worry and assured her that she would find a way home since she had many acquaintances at the bar. On the morning of January 1st, Vanita woke up and was surprised to find that Tanya had not returned. Normally, Tanya would have been home by then, so this delay was unusual. At first, Vanita was not too worried, thinking that Tanya might have stayed at a friend's house. However, things quickly changed when Vanita's mother-in-law knocked on their door with a shocking announcement. Tanya had been found dead in the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident had taken her dog to the vet for an urgent medical issue. While the woman was out, her daughter saw a strange object on the road. She thought it was a mannequin, but when she told her mother, the woman decided to take a closer look. She was horrified to realize it was actually a human body. She immediately returned home and called the police. Police arrived at the crime scene and found the body of a 23-year-old woman named Tanya McKinley lying in a vacant lot near the road. When they arrived, they found her pantyhose pulled down, her skirt pulled up, and her shoes missing. Police also found a blue scarf with a red stain that looked like blood next to the victim. Her shoes were found a few blocks away, along with a wallet containing identification in her name. To clarify the cause of Tanya's death and the development of the case, the police handed over the victim's body to medical experts for an autopsy. Investigators also continued to collect and analyze traces at the scene. After the initial investigation, it was discovered that the victim was likely killed elsewhere, as there was no blood near the body except for the blue towel stain. Furthermore, traces on the ground showed that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the blue towel and the victim's body, the police found some suspicious traces. These were human hair and pubic hair, along with dog hair. They suspected that these hair and pubic hair samples might belong to the killer and that this person might have kept dogs. After the autopsy, medical experts determined that Tanya suffered a head injury from being hit with a heavy object. However, the main cause of her death was strangulation. Furthermore, experts also confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted. Experts collected a semen sample from the victim's body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, they could only determine that the suspect had type B blood. Since these clues did not help the detectives find the killer, they began to develop a list of suspects. The first suspect they focused on was Tim, the victim's ex-boyfriend. Through talking to Tanya's relatives and friends, the police discovered problems in the relationship between Tanya and Tim, as well as constant arguments both before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to break up, Tim objected and continued to try to convince her to come back. Tim kept calling Tanya, visiting her, and acting as if he could not accept the breakup. The police suspected that Tim may have followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They questioned Tim, but he denied any involvement. Tim also agreed to provide a hair sample for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the hair, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that Tim's hair was significantly different from the hair found on the victim's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily eliminated Tim as a suspect. After collecting clues at the scene, the detectives turned their attention to the people who were at the bar on New Year's Eve. They questioned Vanita about whether she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya. However, Vanita said the evening had gone smoothly and without incident. Investigators also learned that Tanya had briefly dated a man named Kurt, who worked as a bartender at the same bar. So they interviewed Kurt, who denied any involvement in the murder. Kurt claimed that after finishing his shift, he attended a New Year's Eve party with friends. However, after questioning Kurt's friends, investigators discovered something interesting. Kurt's friends confirmed that he was at the party, but not immediately after finishing his shift at the bar. Based on this testimony, police believed that Kurt had enough time to theoretically commit the murder. Through interviews with many people who were at the bar, detectives determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one witnessed her leaving the bar. Investigators also interviewed residents in the area near where the body was found. One family said they drove by around 2 a.m. and they were certain that no body was visible at that time. Investigators determined that Tanya was killed within an hour and a half of her last known sighting. During this time, Kurt had no solid alibi. He agreed to take a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive as he gave several false answers. However, Blood tests eliminated Kurt as a suspect because his blood type did not match the killer's blood type, which was determined from a semen sample. The police continued to search for other potential suspects, but their efforts were hampered. The killer's semen could not be analyzed, and the lack of significant evidence or witnesses left the case at a standstill. However, investigators were almost certain that the killer must have lived in the area near where the body was found. The area was on the edge of a large residential area and was isolated from major roads. Police suspected that a stranger would not have come there with the body without knowing anything about the area. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Sadly, Timothy lost his mother when he was 18 months old and was taken care of by his father and Tanya's family. They decided to keep the death of Timothy's mother a secret. As he grew older, relatives told him that his mother had died in a car accident. This truth was kept secret until Timothy turned 14. At Christmas, he was curious about the gift his father had prepared. While rummaging through the house, Timothy stumbled upon a letter written by his father, addressed to famous TV host Montel Williams. Tim mentioned Tanya's murder in the letter, hoping that public attention would help expedite the investigation. Through the letter, Timothy discovered the true fate of his mother because it contained specific details about the case. In 2000, the police department reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA analysis would help identify the killer. To investigate, they sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. After testing, experts concluded that the blood on the blue towel found near the body belonged to an unknown man, not Tanya. They took a sample of the man's DNA and uploaded it to the FBI database, but found no match. The case went cold again and wasn't reopened until 2015, exactly 30 years after the murder. Detectives had to try a different approach when the killer's DNA had not yet appeared in the FBI database. With modern technology, they could search not only for exact matches but also for partial matches. They believed the database might contain information about the killer's relatives, which could lead them closer to solving the case. After searching, they focused on one specific person in the FBI database. His DNA had some similarities to the DNA sample of Tanya's killer, although the similarity was not strong. The police investigated his family extensively and even contacted his relatives. They agreed to assist and provide their DNA samples for comparison. After analyzing the samples, experts discovered that the family had no connection to the suspect, leaving detectives without any significant new clues. In 2018, journalist Tony Adam took an interest in the case. Although he was not a criminal expert, his personal interest in the subject drew him to Tanya's unsolved murder. He wanted to help and contacted the investigators working on the case. The detectives initially viewed his willingness to help with some skepticism. Although an experienced journalist, Tony had no background in criminal investigations. However, as the case dragged on without any progress, the police accepted his help. During the investigation, Tony established a relationship with Tanya's family. They could see his genuine interest in solving the case and the considerable effort he was putting in. He worked to get media coverage of the case, bringing additional attention to it. This also contributed a new perspective to an investigation that had lasted for more than 3 decades. Detectives decided to renew their efforts to find the suspect's relatives. This time, they partnered with Parabon, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. In the previous effort, investigators had only searched for killers' relatives through the FBI's database. However, Parabon expanded the search to include public genetic databases, where anyone can upload their DNA samples. Experts worked diligently to find the killer's relatives, carefully examining family trees to identify someone matching the suspect's characteristics. They were looking for a man who was of age at the time of the crime in 1985 and lived in the area. The process took nearly a year. But in February 2020, experts finally identified a man who could be a suspect, Daniel Wells, 57, who lived in the same city where the murder occurred. As detectives learned more about Daniel, they discovered he had previous run-ins with the law, having been arrested for assault and for indecent exposure in the late 1980s. As of 2020, Daniel continued to live and work in Pensacola with his family. However, to establish a connection between him and the case, investigators needed to collect a DNA sample from Daniel due to a lack of concrete evidence. The police had been monitoring Daniel closely, concerned that he might flee once he learned he was a suspect. The opportunity presented itself when Daniel discarded a cigarette butt near his workplace. Investigators collected it and quickly sent it to the lab. There, experts isolated DNA from the saliva on the butt and compared it to the DNA sample from the crime scene. The results showed that the two samples were a perfect match. 35 years after the murder, the police finally identified the culprit through DNA evidence. Daniel was arrested that same day. Despite the DNA test results, the investigators wanted to hear Daniel's confession. They planned to conduct the interrogation carefully, not revealing all the evidence at once. The investigators deliberately withheld information to encourage honesty during Daniel's interrogation. They gradually shifted the conversation to Tanya's murder and asked about Daniel's whereabouts on the night of the crime. At first, he denied ever knowing Tanya. The detectives then revealed that they had found his DNA at the crime scene. Although Daniel continued to deny everything, he appeared to become more nervous with each question. The detectives emphasized the importance of the DNA test results, making it impossible for him to avoid the questions. They told him that the only way to alleviate the situation was to confess. And it worked. Daniel began to tell his story. Initially, he tried to justify the presence of his DNA by suggesting that he might have had sex with Tanya that night. But the detectives didn't believe him and continued pressing for the truth. Daniel eventually confessed to killing Tanya on that New Year's Eve. Daniel's story raised serious questions. He admitted that he met Tanya at a bar and offered to take her home. They then went to Daniel's house, drank, and had consensual sex. However, an argument broke out, and Daniel couldn't remember what it was about. In a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, he panicked and took her body to another location to dispose of it. On the way back, he discarded her belongings and returned home. However, Daniel's story had many inconsistencies. When asked about the dog hairs on Tanya's clothes and towels, he explained that his roommate had a black Labrador. But this did not explain why Tanya would willingly have sex with him only to have a violent argument that led to her death. Furthermore, Daniel claimed that Tanya died from a blow to the head, but medical experts determined that the actual cause of death was strangulation. This made Daniel's story unreliable and suggested he was trying to minimize his responsibility. A more plausible scenario is that Daniel attacked Tanya, but she fought back. When this failed, Daniel struck Tanya's head, but then realized she was still alive, so he strangled her. Although Daniel's confession did not completely match the facts, detectives had enough evidence to arrest him. Daniel was arrested for murder and taken into custody. Investigators then contacted Tanya's family, including her son, to let them know that the killer had been caught. Timothy was emotional and thanked the police for finding his mother's killer. However, Daniel did not face trial or serve any prison time for his actions. Just 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An autopsy revealed that he had committed suicide. Although Tanya's family was disappointed that the killer had committed suicide in prison, they finally received justice after 35 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah Foxwell. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998 in Salisbury, Maryland. Mary, Sarah's mother, had 3 children from a previous marriage. When Sarah's parents divorced, her mother had to take care of all the children by herself. Sarah always tried to keep the peace between her sisters when they argued and fought. Sarah always radiated positivity. Sarah's family decided to move in with her aunt and grandparents. As Christmas approached, Mary had to work extra shifts to buy presents for the children. Mary lived in a large farmhouse outside Salisbury. The children loved it because there was no space to play. On December 22nd, with only 3 days left until Christmas, the children were excited and playing all over the house. They ordered pizza for dinner, and around 9 p.m., everyone started getting ready for bed. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister Emma at the end of the hall near the back door. After a while of talking, they both fell asleep. The next morning, Robert Foxwell, Sarah's grandfather, woke up and went to wake the children. When he entered Sarah's room, he found only Emma sleeping. Robert thought that Sarah might have gotten up early, so he began searching the house. However, Robert could not find Sarah anywhere. Robert told Sarah's aunt, Elizabeth Foxwell, about this, and they decided to search together. After a while of searching, they realized that Sarah was no longer at home. Elizabeth thought that Sarah might have gone out to play in the snowy night, but she soon noticed that Sarah's shoes and coat were still at home. This made Elizabeth feel worried. Sarah's toothbrush was missing from its usual place in the bathroom. Elizabeth searched the area around the house with Robert, but they found no sign of Sarah. Finally, Elizabeth decided to call Sarah's mother, Mary. Mary immediately returned home, and they contacted the police to report Sarah missing. The police arrived quickly and began searching the house. Elizabeth told the police that Elizabeth always checked and locked all the doors and windows before going to bed the night before. The police began to suspect a kidnapping. They thought the kidnapper might have taken Sarah's toothbrush before leaving the house. The police went to all the windows to check. When they approached the back door near Sarah's room and tried the handle, the door opened immediately. Elizabeth confirmed that the door had been locked the night before. Elizabeth remembered that they had left a spare key near the front door, but when she went there to check, the key was gone. This further reinforced the suspicion of a kidnapping. The kidnapper had learned about their family's life. Only then did he learn about the family's spare key. And the dog in the house did not bark or make any noise on the night of the incident, although the dog would normally be very wary of strangers. Fearing that Sarah had been kidnapped, the police immediately launched a large-scale search operation. News of Sarah's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community, and many local residents contacted the police to offer help. The police chief appealed to the community through the media, asking people to check their properties for any suspicious signs. To search for Sarah, the police mobilized dozens of officers from the local police department and received support from police from neighboring towns and other states. The common goal of everyone was to find Sarah alive. Since the criminal had taken her toothbrush, this could be considered keeping her alive, so the police mobilized all resources to participate in this search. Outside the house, the police found the first traces of the kidnapper. There were fresh tire tracks in the snow, indicating that the kidnapper had used a car. Since all of Sarah's warm clothes were left at the scene, it was clear that the kidnapper could not have taken her on foot. Sarah's relatives were taken to the police station to give statements. While at the police station, Sarah's sister, Emma, revealed an important piece of information. She recalled that she had woken up on the night of the incident because she heard a man talking to Sarah. Not understanding what was going on, Emma pretended to be asleep, but she watched the man leave the room with Sarah. Emma's account also revealed that Emma recognized the man. This man was Mr. Thomas, a familiar face known to family members. Thomas Leggs, 30, was the ex-boyfriend Elizabeth. Although the couple had separated several months earlier, Thomas was also well known to the police due to his extensive criminal record. Thomas was first sentenced to prison at the age of 18 for assaulting a 12-year-old girl, serving a 4-year sentence but released early after a few months. He was then sentenced to 7 years for assaulting another girl but was released early after only 6 months. Thomas was then sentenced to 6 months for another assault. In short, Thomas had a history of abusing girls and women. After Thomas's wife returned home from the hospital with their newborn daughter, he attempted to assault another girl on the same day. His wife later divorced him and obtained a restraining order against Thomas because he had threatened to kill both her and their daughter. Another incident occurred when a woman and her young daughter moved into the street where Thomas lived. One day, the young daughter and her friends were playing in the yard. Thomas approached the two children. He said that he had been watching the two girls playing in the yard and called them wild girls. Thomas then picked up a stick and began to hit the two children on the buttocks. The girl ran inside and told her mother what had happened. The mother saw Thomas through the window and realized that she had seen his face before moving into the house. She checked the sex offender registry in the area and had a photo of Thomas. The mother identified Thomas as the attacker. She reported Thomas to the police, but although the case went to court, he avoided any punishment for his actions. Before the trial began, the woman was asked not to mention that Thomas had been convicted of sexual assault and was on the sex offenders register, as it could lead to an unfair verdict for Thomas. In another incident, just months before Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was arrested for suspicious behavior. He had sneaked into a 24-year-old woman's bedroom in the middle of the night, undressed, and masturbated next to her bed. After his arrest, Thomas was released on bail. Initially, he successfully kept his criminal record from Sarah's aunt, Elizabeth, but she eventually found out. However, Thomas was able to convince Elizabeth that all the accusations were false. The police suspected that Thomas was behind Sarah's abduction for the following reasons. Sarah's relatives also said that while Thomas was dating Elizabeth, he spent significantly more time with Sarah than with the other children in the family. This was not considered suspicious at the time, but after Sarah went missing, it became concerning. The police wanted to question Thomas. So they went to his house, where they took him in for questioning and also obtained a search warrant for the shed. Inside the shed, the police found messy and appalling living conditions, but did not find any evidence linking them to Sarah's disappearance. Police discovered a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs in Thomas's storage room. During questioning, Thomas repeatedly denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. Thomas said he tried to avoid being alone with children while dating Elizabeth. When asked about Emma seeing him on the night of the abduction, Thomas claimed that Emma often made up stories and that he was not there. Thomas showed a lack of seriousness when it came to Sarah's disappearance, constantly smiling, mocking the sheriff during questioning. Thomas also claimed that he had an alibi, saying that he had been at the bar with his friends until late at night. Police quickly investigated Thomas's alibi. Had someone who had seen him at the bar. However, he left the bar around 1 a.m. and did not reappear until around 7 a.m. When police checked Thomas's phone, they discovered that he had texted several women that night asking them out on dates, all of whom he rejected. Although the search for Sarah was difficult, one reason the police continued to search was the hope that Sarah was still alive. So when the police searched Thomas's pickup truck, they found Sarah's green toothbrush and a large stick of gum. The police believed that Thomas may have used the stick of gum to get Sarah into his car. The tire tracks on Thomas's car matched the tire tracks left in the snow in front of Sarah's house the night she went missing. When police questioned Thomas about this, he claimed that he had not been to the house in over a month. In order to search for Sarah, Hundreds of police officers and volunteers worked together to search a large area around Sarah's house. They searched through abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. A canine unit with search dogs was also mobilized to help track Sarah's scent. In response to that information, helicopters provided aerial observation so as not to miss any areas. Many people came to the police station and volunteered to join the search. Because of bad weather and the approaching holiday, the search that day did not bring the desired results. However, no one was discouraged, and the search continued early the next morning. During the search, the number of volunteers did not decrease but increased significantly. In total, 3,000 people participated in the search. Meanwhile, the police collected more evidence implicating Thomas in the kidnapping. Immediately after bringing Thomas to the police station, he was given a new set of clothes and his clothes were sent to the laboratory. Experts discovered strange DNA on Thomas's underwear and compared it with Sarah's DNA sample taken from her belongings. The results showed that the two DNA samples were a perfect match. Based on the discovery of DNA on Thomas's clothes, the police came to a conclusion. Thomas likely sexually assaulted Sarah after kidnapping her. On the second day of the search, there were still no results, and on Christmas morning, thousands of people continued to search for Sarah. Even though it was a holiday, no one gave up. Police focused their search on an area near the state line, about 8 miles from Sarah Elizabeth's aunt's house. The area was heavily wooded, prompting hundreds of people to search thoroughly in hopes of finding Sarah alive. However, the actual results were tragic. At around 4 p.m., police discovered Sarah's body lying on the ground near the state line. When medical experts began an autopsy, they determined that Sarah had been sexually assaulted and had signs of strangulation. Notably, experts found soil in Sarah's lungs, suggesting that her killer had attempted to drown her during the torture. After the attack, Sarah suffered severe burns. Police believe her attacker left her in the woods for some time, went to get gasoline, and returned to light her on fire. Finding smoke in Sarah's lungs suggested that Sarah was still alive at the time. The brutality of the case shocked the police, Sarah's family, and those involved in the search for her. After Sarah's body was discovered, forensic experts found some of the girl's hair and pieces of fabric from her pajamas in Thomas's pickup truck. New evidence of Thomas's involvement in the kidnapping was introduced, along with other evidence, but the trial was delayed for more than a year. In early 2011, the prosecution decided to offer Thomas a plea deal. Under the deal, Thomas would admit his guilt and receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Thomas eventually agreed to cooperate and tell the police everything. Thomas admitted to luring Sarah away from her home, then taking her away, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. Thomas was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. During his first days there, another inmate attacked Thomas with a homemade weapon during lunchtime, causing several serious cuts. Thomas survived, and prison staff took extra protective measures to prevent other inmates from harming Thomas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, to her father, Brian Doolin, and mother, Amy Doolin. Scottsville is a small farming community where many people know each other. The town does not have many options for entertainment, so school sports are a big part of the locals' lives, especially soccer. Schools host regular games and tournaments, and for the locals, participating in sports is a tradition. Gabby's family is no exception. She has 2 older brothers, and her parents encouraged their children to participate in sports. When Gabby turned 7 in November 2015, her town prepared for the biggest football game of the year. Her school's football team would be playing against a team from another county. Gabby's older brother was on the football team, and she was on the cheerleading squad. The whole town was looking forward to the game. Gabby's family was going to the game, and Gabby convinced Brian and Amy to let her go with them. They initially planned to leave Gabby at home but eventually agreed to take her. When they got to the stadium, Gabby was excited to see her friends and asked her mom if she could hang out with them. Amy agreed but asked her to stay on campus and play with the other kids. During the entire time, Gabby kept running back and forth between her mom and her friends, playing and having a good time. Gabby also went to Brian in the announcer's room and asked for some money to buy snacks. After a while, Gabby's friends came up to Amy in the stands. Her mom took one look and noticed that Gabby wasn't among them. Gabby's friends asked her if she had seen Gabby and were worried. Amy said she hadn't seen Gabby in a while. She then asked why they were worried, and the girls explained that they had been playing hide and seek. Gabby had been assigned to look for them, and they had been hiding in the restroom. However, as time passed and Gabby had not arrived, the girls decided to leave the hideout to look for her. When they left the hideout, the girls could not find Gabby. They called her name and checked all the places they had played before, but Gabby seemed to have disappeared. The girls began to worry and thought that Gabby might have gone to the stands with her mother. After hearing the story, Amy began to panic and ran to her husband. Amy told Brian that Gabby was missing. Brian immediately began searching the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, Amy went to the snack bar where Gabby wanted to go and began looking for her there. After searching and finding no sign of Gabby outside the waiting areas around the stadium, Brian and Amy returned to the broadcast room and made an announcement over the loudspeaker in the hope that Gabby would hear them. This did not yield any results. Brian and Amy did not give up and continued to ask the people present to let them know if they knew where Gabby was. And several people joined them in the search for Gabby. They then continued to search the area around the stadium and asked the workers to light up the stadium areas with large lights. They also went deep into the surrounding areas of the baseball field, especially the small woods behind it. Despite their efforts, they still did not find her. It had been about a quarter of an hour since Gabby had gone missing, and Brian and Amy decided to call the police. The police arrived shortly after, heard what Gabby's parents and friends had to say, and immediately began an urgent search. While there had been previous missing persons cases, none had involved children. As such, they were rare in small towns, and the police were immediately faced with the worst-case scenario, especially when there were signs of crimes involving children, such as kidnappings and assaults. In that context, they were immediately faced with another difficult problem: the perpetrator could be at the stadium. This fact made the police alert and accelerated the investigation. The police realized that they did not have much time and that everyone would be going home soon. Therefore, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. The police closely guarded all exits to prevent anyone from sneaking out. To avoid disrupting the search efforts, the police did not inform people about what was happening. If people knew that the police were investigating the kidnapping of a 7-year-old girl that had occurred nearby, the situation could have become chaotic. Meanwhile, the state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. In a location in the woods, they stumbled upon a small creek and discovered the body of a young girl. They identified the victim as Gabby and called an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner's office. After a preliminary examination, the police determined that the girl's cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were obvious marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of the girl's clothing was missing, leading the police to suspect that Gabby had been sexually assaulted. Amy saw an ambulance near the woods and thought that the police had found her daughter, so she rushed there but was stopped by the police. They did not want her to see the horrific scene. The police were investigating the murder and decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. They suspected that the killer might be among them and needed to find a way to identify him. The detectives spoke to Brian and Amy, telling them about what might have happened to Gabby. The detectives also asked Brian and Amy if they had any suspicions about who might have committed this heinous act. They wanted to know if they had noticed anyone suspicious or if anyone had threatened their family. However, Brian and Amy insisted that they had no idea who might have done this. The detectives then spoke to Gabby's friends, asking them if they had seen anything strange. The detectives wanted to know if anyone had been following or watching them. But the girls said they could not recall anything of the sort. The police also took Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to take a close look at the people present. They hoped that the girls might remember something. However, this did not lead to anything. The detectives believed that Gabby's friends might have seen the kidnapper but were too afraid to point him out or did not realize the significance of what they had seen due to their age. So the detectives asked them to recall every detail of that evening. Finally, one of them recalled that while she and Gabby were in the bathroom, she had seen a man standing near the door. The girl could barely remember what he looked like, except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police questioned the ticket seller at the game, and he also remembered the man with the denim jacket. He said the man looked strange and drunk. However, the police were still unable to identify the man. The police continued to interview the people who attended the game, and gradually everyone learned why they were being held. When they realized that they might be in the same room as the killer, everyone was scared, especially for the safety of their children. But they still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators compared the list of names of all the men in the gym to the sex offender registry but found no matches. The police also visited the homes of several sex offenders who lived nearby, but all had solid alibis, and none of them were near the school at the time. Meanwhile, the police continued to interview people at the school and found some important clues. Some people told the police that during the game, they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the girls' restroom, acting suspiciously. He was a local, so many people knew him. Witnesses also said that he was wearing a denim jacket, a description that matched that given by one of Gabby's friends, who also saw a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He said that Timothy seemed unusual during the game. His youngest son was playing on the field, but Timothy was not paying attention. This was very strange because Timothy was usually very interested in his son's athletic achievements. He even seemed lost. Other witnesses also said that Timothy's behavior seemed strange, which prompted investigators to talk to him. By nightfall, almost everyone at the school had been released. The officers decided to go and question Timothy, but they had first consulted with the local police chief. The police chief had known Timothy since childhood and thought that Timothy was unlikely to commit his crimes, citing that Timothy's criminal record was mostly clean, except for minor traffic fines. The officers then went to Timothy's home, where he lived with his wife and 5 children. When they arrived, the officers knocked on the door and Timothy answered. They asked him if he knew why they were there. He replied that he knew about Gabby's murder but denied any involvement. In an attempt to elicit a response, the detectives asked if he had any explanation for a video recording showing him talking to the victim, Gabby, before she was killed. In fact, no such video existed. Timothy initially said he did not know what the officers were referring to. However, he quickly recanted his statement. He admitted that he had spoken to Gabby that evening near the stadium. He explained that he had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette when a group of girls ran past him. Moments later, Gabby walked by and asked if he had seen her friends while they were playing hide-and-seek and needed to be found. Timothy claimed to have directed her to the girls, and then she left. Detectives were skeptical of Timothy's rapidly changing story. His account indicated that he had been at the scene just minutes before the victim went missing, and there were no witnesses outside the stadium at the time, raising concerns that he may have had the opportunity to commit the crime. Detectives then asked for DNA samples and the clothes he was wearing at the stadium, which Timothy agreed to. However, when examining the clothing, police discovered what appeared to be blood stains on his pants, denim jacket, and underwear. When asked about the stains, Timothy claimed that they were just stains and that the police had made a mistake. Detectives were skeptical, but they needed to wait for the results of DNA analysis before making an arrest. Although the case was a priority for the lab, the analysis took several days to complete. The medical examiner completed an autopsy and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was indeed strangulation. They then took a biological sample from Timothy, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Police received an unexpected lead in the form of an anonymous letter reporting a suspicious man at the game. The letter included specific details, such as the make and model of the person's car and the license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly identify the owner of the car. The owner of the car, a student who lived about half an hour's drive from Scottsville, was quickly questioned by police. However, he denied attending the game and claimed not to have heard of the murder. He also provided an alibi, saying he was at work that evening. Police checked his alibi and found it credible, eliminating him as a suspect. However, the anonymous letter writer was never identified, leaving questions about the letter writer's motives. It is possible that someone was trying to frame the innocent student or play a prank on him. Police received another lead after several people reported suspicious behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He initially claimed to have attended the game, but later denied having done so. He also mentioned witnessing girls playing hide-and-seek. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. Furthermore, they discovered that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had gotten into a heated argument with his father, even holding a knife to his father's neck and threatening to kill him. When the police learned of this information, they went to the boy to investigate. However, they needed the boy's parents to be present to conduct the investigation. The boy's mother refused to provide a DNA sample, preventing the police from conducting further investigation. Rumors about this investigation spread quickly in Scottsville. People began to talk about the police investigating the Madden family in connection with Gabby's murder. Various theories were put forward, with some people thinking that one of Madden's older sons might be the culprit. Others suspected Madden himself or thought that he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also heard about these rumors and were shocked. Gabby's father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and knew the family well. Their sons had played football together, and their daughters had cheered together. The two families were very close, even sitting next to each other at games. So Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone in the Madden family could be involved in the murder. After rumors spread throughout the town, the Madden's eldest son, then 20, began exchanging information with local officers on social media using profanity and threats, asking them to keep their distance from his family. Due to the content of his threats, the police were forced to arrest him immediately and discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest in another town. Specifically, he was suspected of assaulting a teenage girl. After being brought in for questioning, he insisted that he was not the perpetrator of the murder and that he was simply upset about the accusations against his family. Importantly, he said he had been at his cousin's house in a nearby town on the night of the murder. He also agreed to provide a DNA sample to assist in the investigation. Gabby's funeral took place on November 20th, 6 days after the murder, and was attended by hundreds of people from Scottsville and the surrounding areas. They raised a significant amount of money to help Gabby's parents cover funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the DNA analysis of Timothy and his son had been completed at the lab, and the samples had been compared to the blood and semen samples collected. The results of the analysis showed that the DNA evidence was a perfect match. The semen found on Gabby's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on Timothy's clothing belonged to Gabby. As soon as this information was available, detectives notified Brian and Amy of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police also went to Timothy's house and arrested him. When Timothy was taken to the police station, he shouted to reporters that he was innocent. He later explained that the blood on his clothes was from scratching himself while passing through a fence. This contradicted his initial statement to the police that it was not blood but mud. With the DNA evidence matching, the investigators took the case to court, and the prosecution announced that they would seek the death penalty. During the preparation for trial, Timothy's lawyer asserted that his client was innocent and that the source of the evidence was questionable. The lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium at the time of the murder to film the game. However, Timothy himself told the police that he had seen Gabby at the same time. The attorney also pointed out that although Gabby's body was found in a creek, Timothy's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium, raising questions about the accuracy of the evidence. Timothy's mother claimed that her son returned home in clean clothes, did not appear to be upset, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the suspect's semen found on the victim's body disproved all of these arguments. The presence of semen could not be explained otherwise, and therefore Timothy's involvement in the case could not be denied. The police believe that Timothy's account of that evening contained some truth. He may have left the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friend. Since Gabby knew Timothy well, she may have approached him and asked for information about her friends. That may have been when Timothy came up with a plan, suggesting that the friends had run into the woods behind the baseball field and offering to escort Gabby there. When Gabby and Timothy were only a few hundred meters from the school, Timothy could have attacked Gabby and then returned to his friends. For years after the murder, in 2019, the parties began discussing a plea deal. The prosecution proposed to overturn the death penalty and exchange it for a life sentence on the condition that Timothy admitted his guilt. Brian and Amy agreed to this decision because the wait for trials was a heavy burden for them. They also worried that if the trial began, they would have to attend hearings for months, reliving the pain of their daughter's death all over again. Timothy eventually agreed and confessed. However, the agreement did not require him to reveal the details of what he had done. He only had to admit his guilt. This did not satisfy Gabby's family, who wanted Timothy to fully admit what he had done to their daughter. During Timothy's trial, the atmosphere became tense when Brian loudly yelled at Timothy. Eventually, the judge had to intervene, suspend the trial, and order the men to be separated. As a result, Timothy was sentenced to life in prison and served his sentence in a maximum security prison. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jasmine Kaur. Jasmine Kaur, an Indian girl, was born on September 14, 1999. She is the eldest daughter of Rashel Kaur. Jasmine later had two younger twin brothers named German and Sukhu. When Jasmine was 6 years old, her father Rashel Kaur passed away. The family had to face many difficulties to overcome this pain. In 2017, Jasmine was 18 years old and decided to start a new journey. She came to Australia with her relatives to seek new opportunities. Jasmine's uncle, who lived in Adelaide with his wife and daughter, moved in with them. Because of her love of learning and desire to help others, Jasmine enrolled at the University of South Australia. After completing her exams, she enrolled in a nursing program. Apart from studying, Jasmine also takes on the responsibility of cooking for her family. She cooks very well. Jasmine has proven herself to be a responsible and diligent woman. Jasmine grew up in a good educational environment. She always kept in touch with her family, especially her mother and close relatives, sharing details of her daily life. To gain practical experience, Jasmine took a job at a nursing home in the suburbs of Adelaide before completing her medical studies. At the same time, a young man named Tarakjot Singh, Born in 1999 in a village in the state of Punjab, India, Tariq Jat had a younger brother named Mohan Singh. Tariq Jat's father often resolved conflicts in the family in a very brutal way. So the atmosphere in Tariq Jat's house was often very tense and made both brothers feel scared. Tariq Jat is known for his kindness and success, always willing to help people around him. At school, he was an excellent student. In 2016, when Tariq Jat finished his studies, his grandparents tried to save a small amount of money to help him move to Australia. Finally, Tariq Jat moved to the beautiful city of Adelaide. Tariq Jat passed the English test, a necessary requirement for admission to the University of South Australia. At that time, he was faced with many choices about his direction and field of study. In the end, he decided to pursue information technology and aimed to get a bachelor's degree. In addition to studying, Tariq Jat also had to work to support himself. Tariq Jat tried many different jobs, mainly related to caring for the elderly. His colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness. Over time, Tariq Jat achieved much success. Eventually, he saved up enough money to buy his own apartment on the outskirts of the city. There, Tariq Jat befriended a young man named Edwin. In 2018, Jasmine and Tariq Jat met for the first time. Tariq Jat and Jasmine were colleagues at their part-time job. Their relationship quickly developed into love. Tariq Jat he identified Jasmine as the person he wanted to build a family life with. However, as time passed, Tariq Jat gradually became jealous. He began to suspect Jasmine. He asked Jasmine to report her activities in detail, controlled her every move, and became jealous when she met friends after work. Tariq Jat became too controlling in his relationship with Jasmine. Tariq Jat kept calling and making baseless accusations. Jasmine felt that she could not bear this kind of life, so Jasmine confided in her mother about these problems. The mother knew and did not approve of their relationship. Tariq Jat remained unchanged and believed that his thinking was correct. Tariq Jat bought a ring to propose to Jasmine in October 2020, although he felt that Tariq Jat was jealous and controlling. Jasmine still accepted his proposal. Jasmine began to feel insecure when Tariq Jat unexpectedly appeared at her workplace. Although Jasmine was very happy to have just experienced the feeling of being proposed to, Jasmine began to doubt Tariq Jat's actions. Realizing that the relationship was negatively affecting her mental and emotional health, Jasmine decided to end the relationship. On January 4, 2021, Jasmine informed Tariq Jat that they had to break up. However, Tariq Jat threatened her that if she left him, he would end his life. The next day, Jasmine saw Tariq Jat watching her from the window during break time, which made her increasingly worried about her safety. Jasmine spoke to Tariq Jat and he again begged her to stay, but she was determined to break up. At this point, Tariq Jat began threatening to harm himself and insisted that Jasmine would be responsible for everything that happened to him. That same night, Jasmine learned that he had taken a large amount of sleeping pills. Jasmine immediately contacted a neighbor of Tariq Jat's in the apartment building, who took Tariq Jat to the hospital. At the hospital, Tariq Jat wrote a letter claiming that he had committed suicide because Jasmine had decided to break up with him, as her family forbade their relationship. The next morning, January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined Tariq Jat but found no signs of mental illness. After being discharged from the hospital, Tariq Jat went to Jasmine's house. Tariq Jat said that he needed to talk to Jasmine about an important matter. And Tariq Jat tried to convince Tariq Jat to come back to him. However, this attempt failed again when Jasmine refused. In desperation, Tariq Jat threatened to make public a private video of them to Jasmine's family. Faced with Jasmine's indifference, Tariq Jat eventually sent the video to her mother. Shocked, Jasmine's mother Harpreet Kaur contacted her daughter. Harpreet was furious when she received the video. Tariq Jat then went to Jasmine's workplace the next day. Tariq Jat stood by his car and patiently waited for Jasmine to leave work. Although Jasmine ignored him and left, Tariq Jat followed her in his car, but suddenly stopped, letting Jasmine go home. However, that night, Jasmine could not sleep well. The pressure from Tariq Jat increased and he kept threatening to share her private video with more people if she did not return to him immediately. January 28, 2021. Jasmine could not bear it anymore. She officially reported Tariq Jat's harassment to the police. The police recorded every detail of their relationship. Due to the seriousness of the case, the police conducted an investigation and met Tariq Jat on February 9 to find out the situation. A few days later, Tariq Jat attempted suicide again but was fortunately discovered by a neighbor in time. In the hospital, he explained that he could not face the breakup and asked to be discharged. His request was accepted and he was discharged. However, after being discharged, Tariq Jat began taking medication prescribed by a doctor to treat depression, anxiety, and agitation. But at the same time, thoughts of harming Jasmine became stronger in his mind. On March 4, 2021, Tariq Jat collected information about the locations of most of the surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, Tariq Jat used another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid detection, Tariq Jat borrowed a neighbor's blue Jeep. On the same day, Tariq Jat went to a hardware store to buy necessary items, including gloves, cable ties, and a shovel. However, Tariq Jat did not know that his every move was monitored and recorded by the store's surveillance camera. Tariq Jat then drove to Jasmine's workplace and waited for her to finish work at around 10 p.m. When she stepped out onto a deserted street, Tariq Jat suddenly attacked, grabbed Jasmine's arm and dragged her into the car. Tariq Jat covered Jasmine's mouth and eyes, tied her hands and feet and drove to a deserted location. He then put her in the boot of the car and continued driving to another city, nearly 400 kilometers away from Adelaide. Along the entire route, from 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded him using the car. When he reached a deserted location, Tariq Jat got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave near the road. Then Tariq Jat opened the trunk of the car and tried to stab Jasmine in the throat with a knife, causing minor injuries. Next, Tariq Jat pushed Jasmine into the grave and began burying her alive. All of this happened in the early hours of March 6. After burying Jasmine, Tariq Jat got back into the car and drove away. Along the way, he discarded Jasmine's belongings along with the remaining rope, tape, and other items. He also discarded his gloves and hood at a location known as the Death Rock. That same day, Jasmine's family became worried when she did not return home. When she failed to show up for work, with no news of Jasmine, her relatives contacted the police and filed a missing person report. During the investigation into Jasmine's disappearance, police reviewed surveillance footage from Jasmine's workplace and discovered surveillance video from the night before showing a man near the building who had been driving toward another city for most of the morning. In an effort to identify the suspect, police issued a public appeal for anyone with information about a man in his 20s who had been in contact with Jasmine or nearby in the days before she went missing. On March 7th, police met with Tariq Jat to question him about previous police reports of stalking. Tariq Jat initially denied any involvement in Jasmine's disappearance. However, he later told police that he and Jasmine had argued and she had attempted suicide. Tariq Jat claimed that Jasmine died after she passed out and he buried her in a remote location. Tariq Jat was later arrested and led police to the place where he had buried Jasmine. Jasmine's body was found under 30 centimeters of sand. Jasmine's hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with cable ties, and her eyes and mouth were covered. The cut on Jasmine's throat was only a superficial wound. An autopsy was performed. During interrogation, inconsistencies in Tarekjot's testimony led to his arrest. The autopsy revealed that Jasmine was alive when she was buried and that the cause of death was lack of air. These findings shed light on the horrific nature of the case. On March 8, 2021, Tarekjot was charged with murder and remanded in pretrial detention. Tarekjot's first appearance in the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022. However, Tarekjot fell ill. Instead, Tarekjot's lawyer appeared and pleaded not guilty. The trial was adjourned until February 6, 2023. On February 6, 2023, Tarekjot publicly admitted in the Adelaide Supreme Court that he had kidnapped Jasmine with the intention of killing her. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, in the Supreme Court of South Australia, the judge sentenced Tarekjot to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 22 years and 10 months. Tarekjot could be eligible for parole after this period. However, if released, the defendant would have to leave the country. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Andrea Lohagin. Andrea Lohagin was born on January 6, 1977, in Bad Belzig, Germany, to a tight-knit family that consisted of her mother, father, and sister. They lived in a newly built residential complex. As children, Andrea and her sister were known for being obedient and diligent in their studies, which made their parents incredibly proud. By the time Andrea turned 16, she had developed into a stunning young woman and an outstanding student, earning her numerous admirers. Andrea and her sister focused primarily on their studies and socializing with friends at parties, avoiding any unwholesome or troubling pursuits. On October 7, 1993, during the autumn break, 16 years old, Andrea spent the day at a local shopping center with her parents. With only 1 year of high school remaining, Andrea was on the cusp of a significant milestone, looking forward to completing her exams and embarking on her journey into adulthood. Andrea harbored dreams of attending university, building a career, and eventually starting a family of her own. The thought of entering this new phase of her life filled her with immense excitement and anticipation. During their outing to the shopping center, Andrea bought new shoes and jeans. She excited to wear them to a party at the club that was coming up soon. That evening, Andrea, a high school student, planned to attend a gathering at the local youth center, where her friends and acquaintances were waiting for her. The center was only a 15-minute walk from Andrea's home in the small town of Bad Belzig. Since the town was considered very safe, with no prior incidents of attacks or crimes, Andrea's parents felt comfortable allowing her to walk to the party alone. Andrea was expected to return home by 10 p.m. to watch a horror movie with her mother, as was their evening routine. However, when Andrea did not come home on time, her family assumed she would be home in a few hours. Andrea's friends who were at the party said she never showed up, which caused them to become worried. This was unusual behavior for Andrea, who was known for being responsible and punctual. She had never been late before, so her friends were worried. Unfortunately, it was difficult to reach Andrea directly, as mobile phones were not widely used at the time, and the youth center didn't have a landline phone. Her friends would have had to leave the party to call her from another location. Nevertheless, the group chose not to jump to conclusions and stayed at the club. They thought Andrea might be dealing with family issues that prevented her from attending the party. Despite the youth center being close by, none of them tried to check on her. The girls assumed Andrea was either running late or grounded at home, and they continued to enjoy the party. However, when Andrea failed to return home by midnight, her mother grew worried. Normally, Andrea would be home by this time, watching another horror movie. At first, Andrea's mother thought she came home late because she had gone out with friends or visited someone's house. But as the hours passed and Andrea didn't show up, her mother became increasingly alarmed. She tried to contact her daughter's friends, with whom Andrea was supposed to be visiting that evening, but none of them were home. This left her unable to get any information about Andrea's whereabouts. Later, one of the girls finally answered, but she had no information about Andrea. The mother became increasingly worried, realizing that her daughter could not stay out so late, as she had to go to school the next day. At 1 a.m., the mother's concern reached a breaking point. She woke up her husband, and they set out in their car at 1:30 a.m. to search for Andrea. They spent hours searching the area around Bad Belzig but found nothing. They visited the youth center, but Andrea wasn't there. Andrea's friends were unable to provide a clear explanation for her disappearance. It was also unknown whether she went missing while heading to the club or after leaving it. Most partygoers had already left, and the remaining youths couldn't provide much information. Around 4 a.m., Andrea's frantic parents reported her disappearance to the local police. However, the police responded slowly and failed to conduct a timely search for Andrea. The police officers initially thought that Andrea had just gone out and would come back home by herself in the morning, once she was sober. However, her parents were certain that something terrible had happened to her. They knew Andrea wouldn't run away because she had no reason to do so. All Andrea's belongings and money were still at home, she wasn't dating anyone, and none of her friends had seen her that night. A week went by before the police started investigating Andrea's disappearance. Up until then, her parents had been searching the town on their own. They had contacted all the local hospitals, but none of them had any information about Andrea. As the search continued without any success, Andrea's parents became increasingly suspicious of a plot of land formerly owned by Andrea's ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Andrea and her ex-boyfriend had broken up shortly before she went missing. There were reports that her ex-boyfriend was struggling to cope with their breakup. The outside of the property appeared abandoned, except for a small, old shed that caught the attention of Andrea's parents. They suspected that Andrea's ex-boyfriend might be connected to her disappearance. They thought it was possible that he had ambushed her on her way to the club, attacked her, and taken her. The parents immediately contacted Andrea's ex-boyfriend, but he denied any involvement. He stated that he was at home for the entire evening and night, and his family members were ready to confirm his alibi. However, Andrea's family didn't believe him. The police were informed by Andrea's parents about a suspicious piece of land owned by her ex-boyfriend's grandfather, and they agreed to investigate. It wasn't until a week after Andrea's disappearance that the police took the investigation seriously. Detectives started questioning the people who were at the youth club on the night Andrea went missing. Many of the partygoers were friends and acquaintances of Andrea, but their statements didn't shed any light on the case. The teenagers who frequented the club often got their dates and days mixed up, making their accounts confusing and unclear. Some people claimed to have seen Andrea at the party, but others disagreed. Initially, investigators thought Andrea might have arrived at the party, then gotten lost in the crowd or left with someone she knew, or possibly been attacked. This theory seemed believable, given that parties with teenagers often involve alcohol, which can lead to incidents when people are leaving. However, after talking to more witnesses, it became clear that Andrea never actually made it to the party, which was confirmed by her friends who were waiting for her. Andrea, who was known for her beauty at school, didn't show up to meet her friends. Detectives believed the accounts from Andrea's closest friends were the most trustworthy. Police have thoroughly checked all routes Andrea might have taken to get to the club. They launched a large-scale search operation, involving trained dogs and many volunteers. Despite their extensive efforts, they couldn't find any signs of Andrea. Numerous press conferences and TV reports were held to ask citizens for help in finding Andrea and warning them of potential danger. Andrea's parents and law enforcement worked together to investigate her disappearance. They made appeals for negotiation in case she was abducted, set up hotlines for witness tips, and offered monetary rewards. However, all efforts were unsuccessful due to a lack of evidence or leads. Many tips were verified, but they turned out to be false. The detectives were only able to piece together a rough timeline of incident leading up to Andrea's disappearance. On the evening of Thursday, October 7, 1993, Andrea returned home from a shopping center with her parents around 6 p.m. She went to her room, listened to music, and looked at her new clothes. The family had dinner together, and Andrea planned to attend a party at the youth club afterwards. She tried to contact a friend to go together, but her friend was already at the club and couldn't be reached. Andrea decided to go alone, and her parents didn't know what she did next. Investigators suspected that Andrea may have been a victim of sexual assault. They thought that her attractive appearance might have caught the attention of a predator, leading to a crime. To investigate, detectives made a list of Andrea's ex-boyfriends and admirers, and checked their alibis. Investigation found that each of the suspects had a reliable alibi for the time of the incident, making it unlikely they were involved. Unfortunately, the surveillance system at the time was relatively underdeveloped, making the investigation more difficult. Detectives started looking for witnesses who might have seen what happened to Andrea. They found out that she had taken a shortcut to the club that evening, and several people had seen her along the way. According to their accounts, Andrea had passed by a group of young people and a couple of teenagers. But she didn't know any of them, so she just kept walking. The last people to see Andrea alive were two boys, 13-years-old Robin and 14-years-old David. By law, their identities and photos were kept private, but detectives were able to track them down and take their statements. The boys said they had simply nodded at Andrea and then gone their separate ways. After that, Andrea seemed to disappear. It became clear that Andrea never made it to the meeting spot with her friends, which meant something terrible must have happened to her on the way. The path she took was a little-known shortcut that mostly only local residents were familiar with. So, the search for suspects focused on people who lived in the nearby houses. Immediately, the police investigation focused on Robin and David, the two teenagers who were the last to see Andrea alive. Both boys came from difficult home environments and lived close to the Andrea family's residence. They were familiar with the path Andrea had taken. Although they were young, Robin and David had a history of minor crimes, including thefts and break-ins. However, there was not enough evidence to accuse them of a serious crime like assault and abduction. Due to Robin and David's young age, the suspicions against them were eventually dropped. The case stalled, and for the next 7 years, there were no new developments. Then, on July 7, 2000, a local resident stumbled upon a horrifying discovery while out for a walk. His dog found a human skull and brought it to him, laying it on the ground. At first, the man thought the skull was a ball, but after he realized it was actually a human skull that had been stripped of its flesh. The skull had a hole in the occipital bone. At first, the resident thought the dog had discovered old remains from World War II, as burials from that time were commonly found in the area. To be safe, the resident informed the police. When detectives received the news, they quickly went to the scene with search dogs. The location where the skull was found belonged to Andrea's former boyfriend. After a lengthy and thorough search, a complete human skeleton was found behind the door of a partially collapsed shed, hidden under a pile of construction debris. The skeleton's poor condition made initial identification impossible. Searching the nearby utility building did not turn up any clues, personal items, pieces of clothing, or other evidence. In recent years, the only person to have gone missing without a trace in the area was Andrea Laube. Consequently, most people immediately assumed the remains belonged to her. Andrea's parents described the outfit she wore on the day of her disappearance, including new black platform shoes and jeans purchased that day. However, None of these clothing items were discovered in the shed, which implies that the perpetrators likely got rid of them. It was also possible that Andrea's clothes were torn off shortly before her death, perhaps during an attempted assault. The remains were only identified as Andrea's after a thorough forensic examination, including an analysis of dental records. This allowed Andrea's family to learn the truth about her fate and give her a proper burial. However, it also sparked concerns about how thorough the initial searches were, since her body was found in an area that had already been searched before. A review of the search operation reports showed that investigators had examined the area, including an abandoned shed filled with debris, but they didn't find anything unusual at the time. It is possible that the body was hidden there later, but there is no evidence to confirm this. The investigation initially concentrated on the accounts of witnesses who claimed to have seen Andrea in the company of two teenagers, Robin and David, aged 13 to 14, just before her disappearance. Andrea's vanishing after being seen with Robin and David had seemed suspicious. The boys were questioned again and repeated that they had seen Andrea on the night she disappeared, but had only greeted her and had no involvement in her disappearance. Despite the lack of evidence, but the investigation still points to their involvement in Andrea's disappearance. It seemed unlikely that such young boys could be responsible for her murder, but their involvement couldn't be ruled out entirely. Further investigation revealed that the boys had a connection to the location where Andrea's remains were found. Witnesses had seen Robin and David near the shed on several occasions, and it was discovered that they had access to the inside of the abandoned building. Additionally, eyewitnesses reported seeing the boys at the entrance of the shed on the evening Andrea went missing, raising more questions and increasing suspicions about Robin and David's involvement in the crime. The investigation into the involvement of Robin and David in Andrea's disappearance was dropped due to insufficient evidence and their young age. At the time, detectives didn't think it was plausible for schoolboys to be involved in the crime. The search for Andrea continued, but authorities, media, and her family failed to uncover any valuable information. The case hit a dead end, and it was eventually shelved as unsolved. Without direct evidence pointing to a killer, detectives stopped their search. It wasn't until 2012, when new leadership took over the regional police department, that the case was reopened. Although new evidence and leads were discovered, there still wasn't enough proof to charge anyone. At this point, detectives didn't have a prime suspect. In May 2016, the case took a major turn, when David, a 37-year-old man, died in Berlin from a serious pancreatic disease caused by years of drug addiction and unsettled lifestyle. He was one of the teenagers who had last seen Andrea alive. During a train trip, David suffered a fatal internal hemorrhage, and his death certificate listed natural causes, despite his extensive criminal history. Following David's death, a witness came forward to the authorities, claiming to have information that could solve Andrea's murder case. David's mother was a witness, but she concealed the disturbing truth about her son's involvement in the case. She revealed that on the evening of the murder in 1993, David, then 14, and his 13-year-old friend Robin encountered Andrea while walking on the same path. The two boys, drawn to Andrea's fashionable clothing, decided to attack and rob her. When Andrea recognized them in the darkness, fearing they would be exposed, Robin and David brutally killed her. The investigators were shocked by a sudden turn of events. They had previously suspected Robin and David of a crime, but lacked evidence to prosecute them. The boys' involvement was also questionable due to their young age. Until then, the boys, Robin and David, had gotten into only minor scrapes with the law and had managed to avoid punishment due to their youth. No one suspected that this lack of punishment would embolden them to commit more serious crimes. Years later, 36-year-old Robin was brought in for questioning. His former accomplice, David, had since passed away, so the police had to rely on Robin's testimony. Robin confessed to everything, including the gruesome details of the crime. He asked to speak with his family first, to confess to them, before providing a final statement to the investigators. The detectives agreed to give Robin 48 hours to meet with his family, appreciating his willingness to cooperate. However, they had no idea that Robin had already planned his next move. When he returned to his apartment, his wife was temporarily away. Robin left a note for his wife and a message for the police, detailing his involvement in the attack on Andrea Lohajian. Then, he disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Robin was declared missing after he failed to show up. On November 4, 2016, a hunter discovered his body in the mountains. Robin's mutilated body was found at the bottom of a deep ravine. It appeared that Robin had taken his own life, so unable to cope with the guilt he committed in his youth. In his final note, Robin described the horrific details of the crime. Robin never knew why David started the attack, as David never shared his reasons with him. Despite this, Robin was able to recall the rest of what happened during the incident. According to Robin, they had no prior connection to the victim, Andrea Lohajian. When Andrea was walking along a small road near a club, she met Robin and David. The attack was a sudden and spontaneous act of aggression. Andrea probably chose that route to get to the party quickly and save time. When Robin thought back to the encounter, he remembered exchanging friendly greetings with Andrea alongside his friend David. Initially, Robin intended to continue his journey home, but his plans changed unexpectedly. David suddenly and aggressively attacked Andrea, catching both her and Robin off guard. After the assault, Robin and David concealed Andrea's body in a nearby outbuilding adjacent to the youth center. They covered the body with construction materials and then left the area. According to Robin's account, there was no apparent motive for the attack, such as theft or personal gain. The act seemed to be driven by a senseless and extreme aggression. Robin and David both had encounters with drug dealers while they were in school. Additionally, they were both under the influence of drugs on the night the incident occurred. Peter Lemon, the head of the youth center that Andrea was planning to visit, had fond memories of her. He described Andrea as a well-behaved guest who did not drink alcohol and mainly came to the center to play billiards and socialize with friends. Peter was deeply shocked by the violence against Andrea and provided full cooperation to the authorities investigating the incident. Peter had also been told about Robin and David. They often seen loitering near a shed a short distance from the club. There were numerous negative rumors going around about these boys, but Peter couldn't bring himself to believe that such young people were capable of committing such severe offenses. However, it turned out that these very juveniles had been roaming freely. For 20 years, Andrea's disappearance remained unsolved, despite a written confession from Robin and witness testimonies placing Robin and David near the scene of the crime. The investigation lacked direct evidence against the suspects, with no DNA or fingerprints found. Detectives carefully analyzed every word from Robin, including their social media posts and phone contents. The investigators were looking for clues that might suggest the suspects discussed or admitted to the crime. Shortly before his death, David's online accounts revealed ominous posts that seemed to hint at his involvement in Andrea's disappearance. But these leads were considered secondary evidence. It is presumed that David knew the investigation had reopened and was consumed by guilt. Although he did not intend to surrender to authorities, but his life had spiraled downward due to his struggle with drug addiction. David's mother believed her son's death was a sign from fate. She had been afraid to turn him in to the police, and David and his friend Robin were hesitant to share information about their past due to fear of revenge from people they used to associate with. This fear was legitimate considering David had a record of past violent behavior and convictions for drug crimes. Despite accumulating indirect evidence, one aspect of the case to horrify detectives, How could two ordinary 13 and 14 years old boys commit such a heinous crime against Andrea? As a result, Andrea's relatives and the investigators began to suspect that a third person, an adult, might have been involved in the crime, guiding Robin and David. The investigation revealed that Andrea's death was caused by a severe head injury from a blunt object. The severity of the injury suggests it would have taken considerable physical strength to inflict it. The detectives questioned whether Robin and David could overpower an older girl and inflict such an injury. This led them to consider the possibility of an adult accomplice, which was supported by other evidence. A new suspect emerged, a man associated with Robin and David's social circle, who was significantly older. However, his name was not disclosed. Robin's testimonies and pre-death note did not mention a third accomplice, and David's mother denied the possibility. Despite this, some witness statements suggested an adult was involved. Specifically, several witnesses reported seeing a truck driver around the same age as the suspect near the shed around the time of Andrea's disappearance. Investigators were able to identify this individual and connect him to the case. In reality, Andrea and her killers, Robin and David, attended the same school. However, due to their age difference, they didn't have classes, participate in the same activities, or have common friends. They may have crossed paths in the hallways or cafeteria. Andrea may have had prior conflicts with Robin and David that intensified their dislike for her. Robin and David both came from difficult and unstable families, which led them to start using alcohol and drugs at a young age as a way to cope. On the night of the incident, they may have been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which could have made them more aggressive. What's more remarkable is that Andrea's remains were found on a plot of land owned by a relative of one of the killers, her ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Some people believe that this resemblance cannot be a coincidence, and they suspect the involvement of her ex-boyfriend in the case. The public was shocked and outraged when it was discovered that these very teenagers were involved in the murder. The revelation led to widespread criticism, mainly because detectives had initially dismissed the case in the 1990s, citing the suspect's youth as the reason. If detectives had investigated these teenagers as suspects at the time of the crimes, it is likely that the victims' bodies would have been discovered much sooner. An earlier investigation could have helped authorities bring the killers to justice. The autopsy results showed that Andrea had a fractured skull, but the object used to inflict the injury could not be identified. The investigation relied only on a few small bones of Andrea. All that remained of the skeleton had decomposed. The investigation into the juvenile criminals relied heavily on testimonies from David's mother and notes from Robin, as no direct physical evidence was available. One of the key concerns for detectives after reopening the case was whether David and Robin had committed any new crimes during the 20-plus years they were free. While it was unlikely, the detectives could not rule out this possibility. They spoke to local residents. However, the detectives did find a history of minor crimes committed by David and Robin. Further investigation into these incidents uncovered disturbing secrets. As detectives looked into Robin's potential involvement in a recent serious crime, they discovered a disturbing incident. In January 2014, a French student named Louise went missing after meeting with friends at the university hospital. Louise had arranged to meet her friends over the phone just before leaving home, but she never arrived. When Louise's friends tried calling her, her phone went unanswered. Assuming Louise had urgent matters to attend to, her friends went home, but when Louise didn't show up for work the next day without explanation, her friends became concerned, as this was unusual for her. Louise was a responsible person, but one evening her phone was unreachable, and her whereabouts were unknown. Later, Louise's body was later discovered, and the primary suspect in her murder was identified as Robin, a juvenile who had previously been linked to the murder of Andrea and had subsequently taken his own life. What made the situation even more disturbing was that Louise personally knew Robin, but she had no idea about his dark past. As a result, she became his second victim. Despite the suspicions, proving Robin's involvement in Louise's murder was difficult due to a lack of direct evidence. The case remains unsolved, and many have criticized police for dropping the investigation into Robin and David, suspects in Andrea's 1993 murder, citing the suspect's young age at the time. The carelessness shown in handling the case allowed criminals to commit new crimes with a high likelihood. Robin's past crimes were neglected, and his case was left unsolved, ultimately leading to the death of Louise. Years earlier, Andrea's body was left to decompose, and her case was also neglected. The Andrea family feels that the young perpetrators didn't get the punishment they deserved for their crimes. Even though the killers are dead, but they were still able to live freely for a time and experience the simple joys of life. The motives behind Andrea's murder, like many other details of the case, remain unknown due to a lack of evidence. This case shows that the idea that young people are not capable of carrying out serious crimes is incorrect. Although the truth will eventually come to light, it may be too late to deliver justice. Andrea's youth, full of promise and dreams for the future, was tragically taken. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982, in the small town of Melbourne, Kansas, USA, to parents who were going through a divorce. Rebecca, along with her three sisters, was raised by her mother but still maintained a relationship with her father. The Gould sisters have a close relationship. They shared a difficult childhood, which brought them closer together. Of the sisters, Rebecca and her youngest sister, Danielle, are the closest. In search of a better life and the opportunity to pursue a university education, Rebecca decided to leave her hometown and move to Fayetteville, Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college and worked part-time. Danielle also moved to Fayetteville to live with her sister. She helped Rebecca take care of the family and pursue her dream of earning a university degree. One day, during a trip back to her hometown, Rebecca met Casey, whom she noticed and felt something different about. They started dating and gradually fell in love. Although they lived far apart, she and Casey shared beautiful moments together. The relationship between Rebecca and Casey grew stronger. On the morning of September 20th, 2004, Rebecca was scheduled to go to Melbourne to pick Casey up from work at a fast food restaurant. After buying coffee and sandwiches, she decided to go back to the mobile home and take a nap before returning to Fayetteville. Meanwhile, Danielle was at Casey's house waiting for Rebecca to pick her up. Rebecca and Danielle had planned for Rebecca to pick Danielle up at noon. However, Danielle tried calling and texting Rebecca but was unable to reach her sister. Danielle then decided to call Rebecca's friends but still did not receive any news. Danielle became increasingly worried. Danielle decided to go to the police station to report Rebecca missing. The police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance by questioning potential witnesses. The first person they chose to question was Casey, the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives went to the restaurant where Casey worked and asked him about Rebecca. Casey said that he had slept over at a friend's house and went straight to work the next morning without seeing Rebecca as usual. He assumed Rebecca had left town with Danielle some time ago. Even though Casey had an alibi, the police still felt suspicious of him. They found it strange that he had left his dog alone at home to spend the night at a friend's house. Furthermore, why would he decide to sleep over at a friend's house the night before his girlfriend left? This was one inconsistency in Casey's story that the police noticed. The police thoroughly searched the mobile home where Casey lived and where Rebecca was last seen. They detected a lingering smell of bleach, apparently used to cover up some sort of incident. Rebecca's belongings were still in place, but the bed was in disarray, and the sheets were rumpled. One of them showed blood stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was Rebecca's. Casey immediately became a suspect. However, he had a solid alibi. Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally driving him to work on Monday morning, and from 8:30 to 4:30, Casey was consistently present at the restaurant. The investigation hit a dead end until a call from a passerby. A week later, a passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and dumped at the bottom of a shallow ravine outside the city. Police searched the area thoroughly for traces and physical evidence. It was not difficult to identify the murdered girl as Rebecca Gould. She was wearing the same t-shirt and underwear she had been last seen in alive. An autopsy later revealed that her death had occurred about 7 days earlier, on the same Monday, September 20th, when Casey had spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators found signs of brutal beatings on Rebecca's body, including multiple bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 blunt force injuries to the head. These were clearly fatal. The shape of these injuries matched the shape of the missing leg from the piano in Casey's mobile home. Police believed it could have been used as a murder weapon, but they were unable to find it. The details of Rebecca's autopsy revealed the horrific brutality of her killer. In addition to the injuries to her head and neck, she also showed signs of strangulation. A broken hyoid bone indicated a prolonged and brutal strangulation. At the same time, there were no signs of resistance or self-defense, which suggested that the attacker may have been someone she knew and who attacked her from behind. The lack of signs of sexual violence also suggested that rape was not the motive for the murder. Detectives continued to investigate Casey, Rebecca's boyfriend. Several witnesses recalled that Rebecca had talked about wanting to break up with Casey because she was fed up with his constant arguments and controlling behavior. Casey's excessive possessiveness became apparent, especially after Rebecca moved to another city to study. However, Casey's alibi forced the police to look for other leads and suspects. Over time, numerous people connected to Rebecca were investigated, but to no avail. The murder of Rebecca Gould went cold. But in the late 2010s, a surprising breakthrough occurred. A podcast series dedicated to Rebecca's murder caught the attention of a man who claimed to have valuable information about the case. The anonymous witness spoke of a confession he had heard, in which he said he had worked with Casey, the victim's boyfriend, years earlier. At one point, after a few drinks, Casey blurted out that he had killed Rebecca. The witness said that Casey confessed to the crime when he was drunk. However, what was suspicious was that the witness had remained silent for many years and only spoke up when his relationship with Casey became strained. Investigators initially viewed the witness's testimony with skepticism. They suspected that the man's testimony was just a way to get revenge and frame Casey. However, they could not dismiss the testimony either. They decided to continue investigating and look for more evidence. After more than a month of investigation, the detectives still had not found enough evidence to charge Casey. However, they felt that the solution was somewhere nearby. They decided to focus on people related to Casey. Particular attention was paid to William Miller, Casey's cousin, who had arrived in town before the murders. At first, William seemed like a minor character, but as the detectives reconstructed the events, his role in the case began to become clearer. William had left the United States after the murder and moved to the Philippines. This made the detectives suspicious. However, since the Philippines did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, interrogating William became impossible. The detectives could only hope that William would return to the United States and come to their attention. Meanwhile, they found some information on social media. William had joined a discussion group about the case and started commenting on posts. He described the area where the mutilated body was found with surprising accuracy. William's behavior raised suspicions. The detectives felt that they were getting closer to solving the case, but they still needed to find more evidence to be able to charge William. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for years suddenly become so absorbed in the details of a tragedy that happened so long ago? Moreover, William's accurate description of the details of the case is almost astonishing. William Miller found his way back to the United States 16 years after Rebecca Gould's disappearance. Investigators finally had the opportunity to ask him some important questions. The police had previously tried to contact him because of a tip from the community. They suspected that he might have a connection to Rebecca. Investigators began by asking him about his life, especially his time in the Philippines. William made no secret of the fact that he was wealthy. He owned a spacious farm with a family and animals. During the conversation, he also talked about his relationship with Casey. He denied seeing Casey the night before Rebecca disappeared, but he also accidentally revealed that he witnessed an argument between Casey and Rebecca. Investigators felt that he had important information that he could not share because of legal restrictions. William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, dead or alive. This statement became an important clue for the police, as they realized that information about Rebecca's death had not been made public, making William's knowledge suspicious. Investigators decided to employ a trick to test William. They brought photos of William's car taken in 2004 into the interrogation room and claimed that there was blood on the gas pedal, matching Rebecca Gould's. Upon hearing this, William became nervous and began to fumble his testimony. He gave several implausible versions of events, including seeing a stranger in a white van near Casey's mobile home and accidentally witnessing a robbery. These bizarre stories only reinforced the impression that William had something to hide. Finally, William announced he was ready to tell the whole truth. He recounted that on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he had gone hunting and stopped by Casey's mobile home to borrow a cell phone. Rebecca, who was inside, sensed no danger and opened the door for William. William suddenly lunged at Rebecca, knocking her to the ground and began beating her with his fists and random objects. He took a broken piano leg and repeatedly struck the defenseless Rebecca over the head. To ensure she was dead, William strangled her with a pair of tights he found in the room. After killing Rebecca, William wrapped her body in a suitcase, mopped the bloody floor, stuffed the blankets and sheets in the washing machine, and turned the mattress upside down to hide the evidence. He took Rebecca's body out of town and threw it into the nearest ravine. Investigators listening to this bizarre confession were haunted by a simple question: why? What drove this seemingly respectable family man to commit such a terrible crime? William swore he had no intention of raping Rebecca and that there was no romantic or sexual relationship between them. He had not robbed her and had no personal grievances or grudges. The reason, he said, was a spontaneous rage at the weakness he sensed in Rebecca. Rebecca had not said anything offensive or done anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. For years, William Miller had boasted about his crimes and taunted the police. Joining the online group became a gain for him, a chance to prove his superiority over the law once again. However, was Rebecca Gould William's only victim? This became the central question for the detectives. In order to find out more information, they resorted to a ruse. They thought this could help them discover the truth. When they told William that they knew of other murders with a method similar to Rebecca's, William began to cry and beg for mercy. He then revealed a series of new details about his crimes, which horrified the detectives. According to William, he was not just a lone killer but a true maniac. At least 5 lives were lost at his hands. The victims were mostly young women, including prostitutes and hitchhikers. William would pick them up on the highway, lure them to deserted places, and then brutally murder them. William did not rape these women. Instead, he derived pleasure from the killing process itself. He watched the life fade from the eyes of his captives, savoring their terror and despair. Then, he would strangle them with their clothes. The detectives listened attentively to William's confession, feeling horrified. They realized that they had encountered a living serial killer, which could help them solve many cases. However, the detectives also questioned the authenticity of William's confession. To verify the information, they asked William to provide more details about the victims and where they were buried. William provided some information, but it was not detailed enough. He gave some descriptions of the victims, but did not provide specific information about the locations or dates of the murders. In the end, the detectives relied on a rough map that William had marked with some of the possible locations where the victims' remains might be found. William's testimony was still valuable. The detectives knew that they had months, if not years, of hard work and careful examination ahead. They would have to search for missing bodies, compare DNA, and identify the victims. The most important thing was that William would eventually go to prison and never be able to hurt anyone again. William had revealed too many details that only the killer would know. His testimony matched the autopsy results and the circumstances of the crime scene perfectly. In November 2022, more than 5 years after William Miller was arrested, the case finally came to a close. William was charged with the premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. However, investigators did not have enough evidence to charge him with other crimes. The court decided to focus on the 16-year-old murder case. The prosecutor argued that a life sentence was appropriate for William. They believed that he was no longer a human being but a killer who posed a direct threat to society. The prosecutor believed that if William were released, even for a day, he would surely commit more crimes. In contrast to the prosecutor, William's lawyers emphasized that he was not responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. They urged the jury to sympathize with their client and allow him to be treated in an appropriate psychiatric facility. In the end, the court convicted William Miller of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 25 years. If William were released, he would be 72 years old. The verdict shocked the people of Melbourne. Many protested that the sentence was too lenient. In their view, a person who committed such a crime did not deserve parole. Some argued that the investigation had watered down the crime and weakened the case to avoid affecting the clearance rate. Ultimately, William's conviction automatically cleared Casey, who many townspeople considered the real killer. Despite the skepticism and outrage, the fact remains that one of the most famous and mysterious murders in Melbourne's history has finally been solved. The real killer, a serial killer and psychopath, was imprisoned, not for life, but long enough to protect society from further victims. While not all the mysteries were solved, Rebecca's family finally knew the truth. They could begin to heal their emotional wounds. Months have passed since William Miller's arrest, and life in Melbourne is slowly returning to normal. Rebecca Gould's family is trying to come to terms with their grief. Her mother has found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in years. Her father has also opened her childhood toys and photo albums, which have been hidden in the attic for a long time. Rebecca's sisters have grown up and are trying to make up for lost time, calling each other regularly to share their grief. Rebecca's best friend, Casey, has decided to stay in Melbourne. He feels he must prove that he can build a new life despite the pain and loss he has experienced. He rarely visits the old mobile home, which holds so many painful memories. But when he gets the chance, he brings white roses to the door, Rebecca's favorite flower. William Miller, who caused pain to Rebecca's family, seems to have accepted his fate in prison. He behaves quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicates with a psychiatrist and takes prescribed medication. However, from time to time, a strange smile flashes across his face, as if reflecting something dark that has long been hidden under a mask of kindness. This story is a testament to the inevitability of justice. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning and criminals are getting away with it, but in reality, it is not. Sooner or later, punishment comes to all those who have crossed the line of humanity, and when it does, there is no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt to carry to the end. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Valerie Reyes. Valerie Reyes is a 24-year-old girl. She grew up in a loving family in the suburbs of New York. Valerie has 3 younger brothers. Valerie is cheerful, sociable, and friendly. Valerie is very close to her mother. The two share their private secrets and often discuss everything like 2 best friends. Valerie has many different talents, including drawing and singing. However, her true passion is to become a professional tattoo artist. With the guidance of her brother, who has experience in this field, Valerie learned and developed her skills. She dreams of opening a tattoo shop with her brother, where they can turn their creative ideas into reality. During this time, Valerie works part-time at a small, cozy bookstore. Valerie's life took a major turn in January 2018. That's when she met Javier da Silva, a 26-year-old Venezuelan man who had just moved to New York on a popular dating site. Javier told a touching story about how he had to flee his country in crisis to save his life. Because of this, he was unable to complete his university studies. Currently, Javier is working hard in a restaurant to build a new life in a foreign country. Valerie felt sympathy for him and they started a romantic relationship after a few dates. However, the relationship developed too quickly and only lasted about 3 months. Javier mentioned marriage, which scared Valerie because she was not ready. After feeling that everything was moving too fast, Valerie decided to end the relationship. Javier initially made a good impression on Valerie's family because he seemed to care about her and wanted the best for her. However, when Valerie expressed her desire to break up, Javier's behavior changed. He refused to accept the end of the relationship. He sent dozens of messages a day, begging Valerie to continue the relationship. In September 2018, Javier called Valerie. He said he had used her bank card to pay for an online purchase and wanted to meet Valerie to return the money. Valerie immediately sensed something was wrong and suspected that it was just an excuse to meet. Valerie then confided in a friend and asked the friend to talk to Javier so that he would stop bothering her. After the conversation, Javier stopped calling and texting. Valerie felt relieved and could finally return to her normal life with small joys and exciting plans for the future. However, Valerie did not know that the worst was yet to come. On January 24, 2019, Javier, whom Valerie had broken up with long ago and had not kept in touch with, wrote to an acquaintance of Valerie. In the letter, Javier claimed that he had caught Valerie in bed with another man. This information surprised and angered Valerie because she knew it was not true. January 27th, after her shift at the bookstore, Valerie returned home and called her mother Ana Reyes in a state of panic. She cried and screamed into the phone that someone wanted to kill her. Valerie had been worried for days and felt that someone was following her. Valerie was so distressed that she could only cry into. After a while of talking to her mother, Valerie seemed to feel a little better. Before going to bed, Valerie texted her mother that she had calmed down and was ready to go to bed. Valerie's family became worried when she did not show up for dinner on January 29th. They kept calling her, but did not receive any answer. This made the family feel scared and uneasy. After waiting for a long time, the family decided to seek help from the police. On January 30th, they went to the police and filed a missing persons report for Valerie. The police immediately began investigating the case and began searching Valerie's apartment, but found no significant clues. There were no signs of a struggle or kidnapping. There were only small blood stains on the pillowcase in the bathroom, but the police thought it could be a simple injury. The police decided to look for Valerie and contacted her mobile operator. They discovered that Valerie's phone had been switched to airplane mode on the night of January 28 at around 3 a.m. Since then, the phone had not been turned on. This made the police and Valerie's family even more worried. But the most alarming fact was that someone had accessed Valerie cloud storage and carefully studied all her photos, videos, and messages. Another worrying detail was that at 5 a.m. on January 29th, just 2 hours after the phone was turned off, someone had withdrawn $1,000 from Valerie's bank account. Surveillance cameras captured a man driving a black Honda to the ATM, quickly taking the money and disappearing. When the license plate was checked, police quickly determined that the car belonged to Javier, Valerie's ex-boyfriend. He was immediately placed on the list of prime suspects. During a search of Javier's home, no evidence was found relating to Valerie's disappearance. However, surveillance camera footage showed that on the evening of January 28, Javier left the house in a black Honda and went to Valerie's residence. Police checked Valerie's phone and found that there had been no calls or messages from Javier in recent months. This indicated that Valerie had not invited Javier to visit or meet. After Valerie went missing, Javier turned off his phone, so his movements could not be tracked. However, at 6 a.m., his cell phone briefly became active near Harrison, Connecticut. At 7:30 a.m., the phone was found in Greenwich. Javier returned home to Queens at 9:43 a.m., as confirmed by nearby cameras. Police later found that Javier had posted an old photo of them on Instagram the night before Valerie went missing. His posting of this photo could have been to let people know that they were still together, or it could have been some kind of secret sign. While the police were investigating Valerie's disappearance, Valerie's family and friends continued to search for her. They posted flyers with Valerie's picture and checked all of Valerie's usual haunts. A week passed in anxiety, with sleepless nights and exhausting searches. But still no results. On February 5th, highway workers saw a red suitcase on the side of the road. When they opened the suitcase, they saw a horrifying scene. Inside the suitcase was the body of a young woman. Her hands and feet were tied tightly with rope, her mouth was sealed with a thick layer of tape. Her thin shirt was torn, her jeans were torn and dirty. The girl was not wearing shoes. People noticed a terrible wound on her head. They immediately called the police to report the incident. The police arrived at the scene. Through tests, they quickly identified the victim as Valerie Reyes. Valerie's parents received news about their daughter. During the autopsy, the gruesome details of the murder were revealed. Before her death, Valerie had been severely beaten in the head with a blunt object, and then, while still alive, she had been stuffed into a suitcase and left to die. The evidence that Javier Dilva was involved in the murder was that Valerie's bank card was found in his wallet. During questioning, Javier gave a surprising explanation. Javier claimed that he had found Valerie's bank card and ID card at the bar. The police presented all the evidence they had gathered, including surveillance camera footage, details of his car, and the movements of his phone on the night of the incident. The police told Javier that they knew he was at Valerie's house on the night of the incident. Javier later changed his story. Javier admitted that he had been drinking too much that night and might have been at Valerie's house, but he didn't know everything. When the police showed him a photo of Valerie's body in a suitcase, Javier was shocked and cried. JV tried to justify his actions. According to his account, Javier went to Valerie's house that night after she invited him. They had sex, but during sex, Valerie collapsed to the floor and lost consciousness. Javier claimed that he wanted to help Valerie and performed CPR and cardiac massage on her, but all were unsuccessful. To avoid being charged with murder, he tried to hide the evidence of the crime. However, when the police asked why Valerie's body was found bound and gagged, Javier was unable to answer. When police later asked about Valerie's bank card, Javier stated that he had withdrawn another $4,350 from Valerie's account. During a search of Javier's home, Valerie's phone and laptop, which he had taken, were also found. Javier finally collapsed after a thorough examination of Valerie's body. There were signs of struggle and violence on her body. Under Valerie's fingernails, Javier's skin and blood were found. Javier's DNA was everywhere on the suitcase, in the car interior, on Valerie's belongings. Javier was immediately arrested and formally charged with the murder of Valerie Reyes. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, Javier da Silva finally fully admitted his guilt in court. On February 5, 2020, a hearing was held in the case of 24-year-old Valerie Reyes. Javier's lawyer tried to defend his actions, arguing that it was the result of a violent and jealous outburst, depression after the breakup with Valerie, and drug use. On September 3, 2021, the court affirmed that 28-year-old Javier da Silva was sentenced to 30 years in prison. This means that he will spend most of his life behind bars. The investigation also found that Javier had been living in the United States illegally. He arrived in the country on May 8, 2017, and his 90-day stay expired on August 5, 2017. Therefore, after serving his 30-year prison sentence, he will be immediately deported to his native Venezuela. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, to a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. Lauren was close to her older brother, Ryan. She attended Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduating, Lauren moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Lida Institute to study cosmetology and skin care. Lauren took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics. Lauren started her career at 18 years old and achieved significant success. She initially spent 5 years, from 2015 onwards, working as a customer support representative. She then became a leading manager at Benefit, a renowned cosmetics company. Next, she worked as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, Lauren got a job as a manager at an aesthetic medicine center. Additionally, she had aspirations to pursue a career in real estate, following in her mother's footsteps. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Lauren was a confident and responsible individual who thrived in multiple areas, including the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. She made her physical health a top priority and led a healthy, active lifestyle. With a strong support system of friends and family, which allowed her to make the most of her leisure time by doing things she loved, such as traveling, going on hikes, and spending time with others. One of her favorite pastimes was walking alone, immersed in music and nature, savoring the fresh air, silence, and tranquility. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of Phoenix, close to her apartment. Lauren's parents worried about her walking alone in empty areas, but she felt sure she was safe. Lauren began each day with a consistent routine, waking up, drinking coffee, chatting with loved ones and friends, and embarking on her daily walk. She believes these things help her start her day on a positive note. However, Lauren has no idea that her gullible and carefree nature will put her in danger. On April 28, 2023, Lauren started her morning routine as usual. She had coffee, chatted with family and friends on the phone, and went for a walk in a quiet area near her apartment in northern Phoenix. The scenic trail took around 15 to 30 minutes to walk one way. Lauren left her apartment at around 10:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras last captured her walking calmly on the trail at 10:52 a.m., wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, with only her phone and keys on her. After that, she was not seen again. Lauren was expected at work at 11:30 a.m. but failed to show up, which was unusual for someone so responsible. Her colleagues tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This worried Lauren's friends, who shared messages on social media and called each other to find information about Lauren's location. However, no one had any news, and Lauren had not been seen after leaving her apartment that morning. At about 1 p.m., Lauren's worried parents went to her apartment because they couldn't get in touch with her. They thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and that's why she didn't go to work. But Lauren wasn't there either. All her belongings were still in place, the doors were locked, and nothing suggested there had been a break-in or a struggle. It looked like she had gone out for a walk and just hadn't come back. After that, Lauren's relatives immediately filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities reacted swiftly and initiated a search, but unfortunately, they did not get any results. The park where Lauren went for a walk was almost deserted. If someone had been passing by when the attack occurred, the tragedy might have been prevented. However, that was not the case. Lauren was last seen walking alone towards the park, and then she disappeared, no longer responding to calls. Throughout the day, the police and volunteers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, the park, and looked for potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and every bush but found nothing. Lauren's loved ones held on to the hope that she might have simply wandered off, got delayed, or visited friends in another part of the city. Lauren's relatives kept calling and texting her, but still didn't know where she was. As the hours passed, their hopes dwindled, and their fear for Lauren's life grew. Her parents, brother, and friends were beside themselves with worry. The following morning, April 29th, was like a terrible nightmare. At around 11 o'clock, the worst happened. A woman walking her dog stumbled upon Lauren's body. She recognized Lauren because she often walked her dog on that route and had seen Lauren before. The dog sensed something was wrong, and the woman saw Lauren's bloody body. She immediately called the police. Police arrived instantly at the scene to a horrific sight. Lauren's body was found 3 meters off the trail, concealed in a thicket with numerous stab wounds. She lay face up with outstretched arms, her clothes torn, and blood was everywhere. Experts began working immediately, with the forensic medical examiner determining that Lauren died on April 28 at approximately 11 a.m. due to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were found on Lauren's body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The wound in her back area was fatal. The nature of the wounds indicated that the attack and murder lasted for some time, as they were in different parts of her body, varying in depth and shape. The injuries on Lauren's hands showed she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides of her hands from trying to deflect the sharp knife. Police realized Lauren fought to the end, but her attacker was aggressive and strong. The attack was unexpected, and scratches on her back, shoulders, and torn clothing indicated the suspect attacked from behind, knocking her down and stabbing her with a knife. He then turned her over and continued to strike. At the crime scene, investigators found a clear footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker, likely belonging to the attacker. The area showed signs of a struggle, with Lauren attempting to crawl away and hide in nearby bushes. However, she was unable to escape, and bloodstains were found stretching several meters from the scene, ending near her body. It appeared that Lauren fought for her life and called for help, but unfortunately, she was alone in the deserted park at that early hour with no one nearby to assist her. Near the body, a barbed wire fence was discovered, which Lauren seemed to have desperately tried to climb over. Torn clothing and blood were found on the wire, suggesting that her attempt to overcome the fence resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions on her body. Lauren's phone and house keys were found nearby, having fallen from her pockets during the struggle. Her phone was broken, with the last calls made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. Further examination of the area revealed a bloody pocket knife among the branches a few meters from the crime scene, providing another crucial piece of evidence. Experts quickly identified the object as the likely murder weapon. Further analysis of the blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and DNA traces from an unidentified male. Investigators also collected hair and skin cells from the killer at the crime scene. Lauren's body, along with all physical evidence, was promptly sent for forensic examination. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the park. They found that one camera captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52, walking alone and listening to music on her headphones, without anything seeming out of the ordinary. However, just 1 minute later, a tall, thin man in dark clothing appeared on the recording, quickly passing by the camera as if attempting to conceal his face. Despite the man's efforts to hide, experts were able to make out that he was a young African-American male wearing a cap. Notably, his height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the individual whose traces were discovered at the crime scene. Another camera, positioned at the park exit, recorded the same man rushing out from around the corner at 10:59, looking around frantically. He then tried to climb over the fence but got his clothes caught, ultimately jumping over and losing his cap in the process. The investigation gained its first lead from records showing the suspect disappearing in an unknown direction. Although the perpetrator's identity couldn't be immediately established, the police now had an accurate description and distinguishing features to work with. Notably, the unknown man appeared in the park around the same time Lauren was murdered, according to preliminary findings. The cameras captured footage of the killer before and after the crime. A detailed analysis of the footage revealed more information. The suspect moved with purpose, glancing around as if fearful of being seen. He appeared in the park about 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren did, suggesting he was following her. After committing the crime, the perpetrator fled the scene in the opposite direction of the park entrance, scaling a fence to escape quickly. This behavior supports the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not his first offense. The killer acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to avoid leaving evidence behind. However, in their haste, they made mistakes that allowed them to be partially captured on camera. Despite being shown footage from the cameras, Lauren's parents and friends were unable to identify the man in the video. The tragedy left everyone shocked and deeply saddened. Lauren's loved ones don't understand why someone could so cruelly take the life-kind and energetic girl. Lauren had no enemies, was not involved in any conflicts, and did not owe anyone money. Additionally, she did not own anything that was worth a significant amount. Her lifestyle is extremely healthy. As a result, the possibilities of revenge or robbery were quickly ruled out. A week after the murder, a press conference was held where police officers shared the evidence they had gathered and appealed to the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, clearly distraught, pleaded with anyone who had information to come forward help and assist law enforcement. In response, Lauren's relatives offered a substantial reward for any information that could help identify the killer. The case sent shockwaves throughout the city, prompting thousands of people to take action by sharing information on social media, organizing search parties, and volunteering. Meanwhile, investigators continued to analyze physical evidence. Forensic experts carefully examined DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence in a laboratory. Eventually, they got a break in the case. The suspect's genetic profile matched a record in the police database, which identified Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African American with a history of crime. detectives promptly began to investigate Teasley's background. Their inquiry revealed that Teasley was raised in a troubled home. His parents struggled with addiction. Teasley had a criminal record from a young age, with offenses including theft, public disorder, and intimidation. In 2020, he was convicted of committing several armed robberies. As a result, Teasley spent almost a year incarcerated, but his sentence was reduced due to positive behavior, allowing him to be released early. Teasley's most recent arrest occurred in January 2023 for a knife attack on a bystander, but the charges were dropped when the victim withdrew their statement, resulting in Teasley receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, the suspect was under police supervision, requiring him to regularly report to the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27th, the day before the tragic incident in the park. Upon learning this, detectives started devising a plan to apprehend Teasley, placing him under 24-hour surveillance. It was discovered that Teasley was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally visiting the store or meeting with suspicious individuals. Having obtained an arrest warrant, police visited Teasley's apartment, breaking down the door to gain entry. However, they found no one inside. The search uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating Teasley's likely intention to eliminate evidence. Teasley's room contained a packed suitcase and a new passport in a different name, along with bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to escape the country. The investigation led detectives to believe Teasley was aware of the search and aimed to evade justice. A massive search operation was launched. Information about Teasley was sent to all states, and border agents were instructed to apprehend the suspect. Surveillance systems have been enhanced at railway stations, airports, and highways. By tracking calls from Teasley's phone and analyzing cell tower signals, detectives sought to pinpoint his location. Concurrently, they collected more evidence, including accounts from witnesses who spotted Teasley following Lauren the day before the murder. Another witness stated that they saw him in the same park 2 days prior to the tragic incident. A thorough investigation into Teasley's past revealed a disturbing pattern of violent behavior towards women. Just a month prior to Lauren's murder, he was detained for harassing a woman at a nightclub. Furthermore, a former girlfriend had previously filed a complaint against him for physical abuse, although the case was ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. It is clear that Teasley was an extremely unstable and aggressive man with a deep hatred of women, whom he considered inferior. Teasley's social media posts were discovered, where he used derogatory language towards women. Photographs were found featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon at the scene. Authorities suggested that Lauren may have been a random victim of Teasley's violent tendencies. Lauren's family were shocked and couldn't understand why someone would be so heartless and cruel. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally murdered for no reason. Lauren's father made a heartfelt plea to the public, begging them not to seek revenge themselves. He wants people to let the police handle the situation and punish the perpetrators through the law, instead of using mob violence. After a 3-day search, Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During the arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. During questioning, Teasley was uncooperative, claiming he had committed no crime and had never seen Lauren before. He later denied being in the park that day, but fell silent when shown surveillance footage, and he requested a lawyer. The prosecutor promptly charged Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence, surveillance videos, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, DNA, and fingerprints from the crime scene. The court ordered Teasley to be held without bail. Teasley's trial began on June 5, 2023, and was one of the most high-profile cases in state history, drawing widespread national attention. Journalists and members of the public who were concerned about the issue assembled in front of the courthouse. Everyone in the courtroom was to catch a glimpse of the person responsible for the horrific murder. Teasley, the defendant, was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange prison robe, his expression eerily indifferent. In stark contrast, Lauren's family was overcome with heartache. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, while her father glared at Teasley with anger and hatred. The prosecutor gave a powerful and emotional speech, portraying Teasley as a ruthless killer who posed a significant threat to society. He stressed how brutally the crime was committed and the overwhelming evidence against Teasley. Prosecutors described Teasley as a psychopath who enjoyed inflicting pain on women, driven by a deep-seated hatred for them. Conversely, Teasley's defense attorney sought to prove his client's innocence. He challenged the evidence, arguing that it was possible another individual was responsible for Lauren's death. The defense urged the jury to remain impartial, to focus solely on the facts and not be swayed by public opinion or emotions. Teasley is currently charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office requested the death penalty, the most severe punishment allowed by Arizona law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department has completed their investigation, and the suspect will face prosecution. However, Teasley maintains his innocence despite the charges. He remains in custody without bail. The trial is expected to take place in October 2025 and will be one of the most high-profile cases in Arizona history. Lauren's tragic death shocked the nation and devastated her loved ones.